Fly this helicopter and I'll marry you. The words echoed through Horizon Aerotech's hangar as CEO Ariana Locke pointed at the janitor, triggering an avalanche of laughter. But when Daniel Reed actually stepped into that $20 million cockpit, when those rotors began to spin, when he lifted off with the precision of a ghost from another life, everything changed. This is the story of a man invisible to everyone until the moment he made them all look up. Stay until the end and comment your city below so I can see how far this story flies. The November morning hung cold and sharp over Horizon Aerotech's sprawling campus in Boulder, Colorado. Frost clung to the edges of the massive windows that lined the company's main testing hangar, a cathedral of steel and ambition where America's next generation of rotorcraft was being born. Inside, the air hummed with the particular tension that comes when brilliant minds gather around something dangerous and expensive. In this case, the Valkyrie X7, a sleek, predatory-looking helicopter that represented 3 years of development and enough investor capital to fund a small nation. Daniel Reed pushed his cleaning cart across the polished concrete floor, the wheels squeaking softly in rhythm with his movements. At 40 years old, he'd developed the kind of invisibility that comes with certain professions. The janitor, the maintenance worker, the person people's eyes slide past without truly seeing. He wore the standard navy blue uniform with Horizon Aerotech facilities stitched across the back, his hands roughened from years of work that left them raw even in the best of times. His face carried the weather-beaten quality of someone who'd seen more sky than most people could imagine, though no one here would ever guess that. The Valkyrie X7 sat in the center of the hangar like a sleeping dragon. Its carbon fiber body gleamed under the industrial lights, all angles and aggressive lines, painted in Horizon's signature gunmetal gray with accents of electric blue. The thing was a masterpiece of engineering. Composite rotors designed to reduce noise signature by 40%, a fly-by-wire system that could compensate for pilot error in milliseconds, and an engine package that pushed the boundaries of power-to-weight ratios. $20 million of cutting-edge aerospace technology, and they still couldn't get anyone to fly it properly. Daniel had been cleaning this hangar for 6 months now. 6 months of early mornings starting at 5 a.m., of emptying trash bins filled with crumpled CAD printouts and energy drink cans, of mopping floors where engineers paced while arguing about torque ratios and failure points. 6 months of being invisible while he watched them struggle with a machine he could have flown in his sleep. But that wasn't his life anymore. The sound of heels clicking against concrete announced Ariana Locke's arrival before she came into view. The CEO of Horizon Aerotech moved through her domain like a queen surveying her kingdom. 34 years old, Stanford MBA, daughter of the legendary aerospace engineer Marcus Locke, who'd founded the company before his death 5 years ago. She'd inherited his business and, some whispered, his arrogance. Ariana wore power like a second skin. Tailored black pantsuit, red-soled heels that probably cost more than Daniel made in a month, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized the sharp angles of her face. 20 employees followed in her wake like a comet's tail, senior engineers, project managers, the head of their media team with a camera crew in tow. Ariana had a thing about documentation, about making sure every triumph was captured for the company's social media channels. Horizon Aerotech's Instagram had 2 million followers, all hungry for content about the future of flight. "All right, people," Ariana's voice cut through the hangar, clear and commanding. "We're 3 weeks from the DoD demonstration. 3 weeks to prove the Valkyrie X7 can do everything we've promised, or we lose a contract worth $800 million. So somebody better explain to me why we still don't have solid test flight data." She stopped beside the helicopter, one hand resting on its fuselage like she owned it, which technically she did. The morning light streaming through the high windows caught the diamond studs in her ears, sending little stars of light dancing across the aircraft's surface. James Hendricks, the chief test pilot who looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days, stepped forward. "Ma'am, as I've explained, the fly-by-wire system is still showing inconsistencies in the collective response time. Yesterday's test run produced a 0.4-second delay between input and rotor pitch adjustment. At operational speeds, that kind of lag could be catastrophic." 0.4 seconds, Ariana repeated, her tone dripping with contempt. "The human brain processes visual information in 0.25 seconds, James. Are you telling me our $50 million engineering team can't match what evolution gave us for free?" With respect, ma'am, it's never about anything with you, is it? Ariana cut him off, turning to address the full assembly. 6 months ago, you all stood in this hangar and told me the Valkyrie would revolutionize tactical aviation. You promised me a helicopter that could outmaneuver anything in the sky. Now you're giving me excuses about response times that are shorter than a human blink. Daniel continued his work, wiping down the windows of the office that overlooked the hangar floor. From this angle, he could see everything, the nervous energy radiating from the engineering team, the camera crew positioning themselves for the best angles, Ariana's performance playing out like theater. He'd seen this type of leadership before, in officers who confused fear with respect, who thought volume equaled authority. Maybe, someone from the engineering team ventured carefully, we should consider a redesign of the hydraulic system integration. A redesign, Ariana laughed, but there was no humor in it. 3 weeks before our demonstration, you want to redesign core systems. Brilliant. This is why I brought in Hendricks from Sikorsky. James, you've flown Blackhawks in combat zones. You've logged what, 8,000 hours? 8,200, ma'am. 8,200 hours, and you can't handle a 0.4-second delay? Ariana's voice rose. Maybe the problem isn't the helicopter. Maybe the problem is that we've become so cautious, so afraid of risk, that we've forgotten what pioneering actually means. The hangar had gone quiet, except for the distant hum of ventilation systems and the soft squeak of Daniel's cleaning cart as he moved to polish the helicopter's cockpit glass. He'd learned this approach years ago. Stay quiet, stay useful, don't draw attention. After everything that had happened, after losing Sarah, after the injury that ended his career, he'd accepted this simple truth. Some men are meant to fly, and some men are meant to watch others fly. But God, he missed the sky. You know what? Ariana's voice suddenly shifted, taking on a theatrical quality that made Daniel's instincts prickle. He recognized that tone. It preceded bad decisions. Since we're all standing around discussing what we can't do, let's talk about what we can do. Let's make this interesting. She pivoted, her eyes scanning the assembled group before landing on Daniel. He felt her gaze like a spotlight, exposing him in a way that made his shoulders tense. You there, Ariana called out. Janitor, what's your name? Daniel straightened slowly, setting down his cleaning cloth. Every face in the hangar turned toward him. Behind Ariana, he could see the camera crew adjusting their angles, catching this moment. Daniel, ma'am. Daniel Reed. Daniel Reed, she repeated, walking toward him with the kind of predatory grace that came from knowing you held all the power in a room. How long have you worked here, Daniel? 6 months, ma'am. 6 months of cleaning up after geniuses who can't solve basic engineering problems. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Tell me, Daniel, do you have any opinions on aviation? He could feel the trap closing. No, ma'am. Just here to keep things clean. Modest, I like that. Ariana turned back to her audience, spreading her arms wide. See, this is what I'm talking about. This man knows his role. He comes in, does his job, doesn't make excuses about 0.4-second delays. She spun back to Daniel, and something glinted in her expression, mischief mixed with cruelty. Daniel, how would you like to be famous? I'm fine where I am, ma'am. Oh, come on. Don't you have dreams? Aspirations? Every American wants their 15 minutes. She gestured grandly at the Valkyrie X7. Tell you what, fly this helicopter just once around the hangar, and I'll marry you. How's that for an incentive program? Laughter erupted through the assembly. Not gentle chuckling, but the kind of explosive mirth that comes from tension being released, from the powerful making a joke at someone powerless. Phones came out immediately, capturing the moment. Daniel could already imagine the social media posts. CEO makes ridiculous bet with janitor. Billionaire's daughter promises to marry cleaning staff. Horizon Aerotech's Ariana Locke at it again. James Hendricks laughed the hardest, doubling over, his face red. Oh man, that's good. That's really good, ma'am. I'm serious, Ariana pressed, warming to her performance. Fly the Valkyrie, Daniel, and we'll set a wedding date. I'll even let you pick the venue. What do you say? Every man wants a rich wife, right? Here's your chance. The camera crew was eating it up, zooming in on Daniel's face to catch his reaction. He could feel the heat of humiliation they expected to see, the embarrassment that would make this clip go viral. CEO puts janitor in his place. Billionaire playfully mocks working class man. The algorithm would love it. But Daniel didn't flush red, didn't stammer or look away. Instead, something shifted in his expression, just for a moment, like a shadow passing across the sun. The smile that touched his lips carried a weight no one in that room could interpret, like a man remembering a joke that only he understood. "That's generous of you, ma'am," he said quietly. Ariana blinked, seemingly surprised he'd responded at all. "Well, don't you want to try? Come on, give us a show. Sit in the cockpit at least. Pretend you're a pilot." More laughter. One of the junior engineers actually had to wipe tears from his eyes. Daniel looked at the Valkyrie X7, really looked at it for the first time since walking into work that morning. He took in the aggressive rotor configuration, the angle of the tail boom, the positioning of the stabilizers. His trained eye caught things the designers had done right: the weight distribution, the clear attention to reducing vibration transfer to the cockpit. He also noticed things that would need adjustment in real-world conditions, minor flaws that wouldn't appear until someone pushed the machine past its comfortable limits. "It's a beautiful aircraft," he said, and something in his tone made a few people stop laughing. "It is," Ariana agreed, clearly enjoying herself. $20 million of beautiful. So what do you say, Daniel? Want to be a pilot for a day? The moment stretched out, hanging in the air like the morning frost that still clung to the windows. Daniel could feel the familiar pull, the old hunger that never quite died no matter how many years passed. Up there, in the sky, he'd been someone. Down here, he was invisible. But invisibility had its own kind of power, the power of being underestimated. "Maybe another time, ma'am," he said finally, picking up his cleaning cloth. "Helicopter looks like it needs someone who knows what they're doing." This triggered another round of laughter, people thinking he'd made a self-deprecating joke. Ariana smiled, satisfied with her entertainment, and turned back to her team. "All right, show's over. Hendricks, I want another test flight scheduled for tomorrow morning. Engineering team, fix whatever needs fixing. And someone please find me a pilot with the guts to actually fly my helicopter instead of complaining about response times." She started walking toward the exit, her entourage falling in behind her. "We're burning daylight and money, people. 3 weeks. Make it happen." As the crowd dispersed, returning to their stations and their problems, Daniel continued his work. He moved around the Valkyrie with practiced efficiency, wiping away fingerprints and dust, treating the machine with a care that seemed excessive for a janitor, but which no one noticed because no one was watching him anymore, except for one person. Marcus Webb, a senior engineer in his 60s with gray hair and kind eyes, had been with Horizon since its founding. He'd stayed back while others left, ostensibly checking readings on a nearby monitor, but really observing Daniel. There was something about the way the janitor moved around the aircraft, the way his hands traced certain lines, that reminded Marcus of something he couldn't quite place. "That was rough," Marcus said quietly as he approached. "Ariana, she doesn't always think before she speaks." Daniel glanced up, surprised someone was talking to him like a person rather than a prop. "It's fine. Not the worst thing anyone said to me. Still, you handled it with grace." Marcus extended his hand. "Marcus Webb. Yes? I've seen you around, but don't think we've officially met." Daniel Reed. They shook hands, and Marcus noticed the grip, firm, confident, the handshake of someone used to trust and responsibility. "You know anything about helicopters, Daniel, the way you were looking at the Valkyrie just now?" Daniel smiled, but it was sad. "Just appreciate the engineering. It's good work." "It is. Though we're having trouble getting anyone to really push it to its limits. Pilots these days, they're cautious. Too much simulation training, not enough instinct." Marcus studied Daniel's face. "You ever fly?" The question hung between them, heavy with possibility. Daniel could have lied, could have maintained his invisibility. Instead, he met Marcus's eyes and said simply, "Once upon a time." Before Marcus could press further, one of the junior engineers called for him. With an apologetic nod, the old man walked away, leaving Daniel alone with the Valkyrie. Daniel finished his cleaning, packed up his cart, and prepared to move to the next section of the facility. But before he left, he allowed himself one moment, just one, to stand beside the helicopter and rest his hand on its fuselage. Through his palm, he could almost feel it humming, could imagine the vibration of the rotors, the pitch of the engine, the incredible lightness that came when wheels left the ground and the world fell away below. "Soon," he whispered, so quietly that even the ghosts of his past could barely hear it. Outside the hangar, the sun had fully risen over Boulder, painting the Rocky Mountains in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere in the city, Daniel's daughter Maya was starting her school day, probably daydreaming through math class the way she always did. Tonight, he'd pick her up, make her dinner, help with homework, and tell her stories about mommy before bed. It was a good life, a simple life, the kind of life you built when the extraordinary pieces of yourself had been broken, and you'd carefully, painfully, reassembled what remained into something functional. But standing there in the hangar, surrounded by the smell of aviation fuel and hydraulic fluid, Daniel felt those broken pieces starting to remember their original shape. The video of Ariana's proposal had already been posted to Horizon Aerotech's Instagram by the time Daniel took his lunch break. He didn't have social media himself, but Marcus found him in the break room and showed him on his phone. 60,000 views already, the comments flooding in. CEO savage as always. Imagine if he actually could fly it, though. This is why we love Ariana Locke, no filter. Kind of mean, though. IDK feels uncomfortable. That janitor took it like a champ lol. Daniel scrolled through them with no expression, then handed the phone back. People always need someone to laugh at. Doesn't bother you. Should it? Daniel unwrapped the sandwich he'd packed that morning. Turkey and cheese, nothing fancy. 6 months ago, I was nobody. Today, I'm still nobody, but 60,000 people have seen my face. That's progress, right? Marcus laughed despite himself. You're an interesting guy, Daniel Reed. Most people would be furious. Most people haven't learned that fury doesn't change anything. Daniel took a bite of his sandwich, chewed thoughtfully. Besides, she's not wrong. I'm the janitor. She's the CEO. That's how the world works. The world's worked a lot of different ways for a lot of different people, Marcus said quietly. Sometimes the roles we play aren't the whole story. Daniel met his eyes again, and something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or respect. No, Daniel agreed softly. Sometimes they're not. The rest of the day passed in its familiar rhythm. Daniel cleaned offices, emptied trash, mopped floors, reset bathrooms, all while the Horizon Aerotech machine churned around him. Engineers argued, managers scheduled meetings, the marketing team edited footage of Ariana's morning performance for maximum social media impact. By the time Daniel's shift ended at 3 p.m., the video had crossed 500,000 views and spawned a dozen reaction videos from aviation YouTubers and workplace culture commentators. He changed out of his uniform in the facility's locker room, pulling on jeans and a worn leather jacket that had seen better days. In the cracked mirror above the sink, he studied his reflection, lines around the eyes from years of squinting into horizons, a small scar above his left eyebrow from an incident he tried not to remember, gray threading through the dark hair at his temples. 40 years old. When had that happened? The drive to Maya's school took 20 minutes through Boulder's afternoon traffic. Daniel had bought his truck used 5 years ago, after selling almost everything else when Sarah died. It ran fine, got him where he needed to go, which was all that mattered. He pulled up to Mountain View Elementary just as the final bell rang, watching the flood of children pour out like a breaking dam of energy and noise. Maya emerged near the middle of the pack, 7 years old with her mother's dark curls and Daniel's gray eyes. She wore a purple backpack almost as big as she was, and carried a folder clutched against her chest like treasure. When she spotted the truck, her whole face lit up in a smile that made every hour of cleaning toilets worth it. "Daddy!" She ran over and Daniel caught her in a hug that lifted her off the ground. "Hey, Butterfly, good day?" "The best! I got an A on my science project. Mrs. Henderson said my model of the solar system was the most accurate in the class." She waved the folder at him. "Can we put it on the fridge?" "We'll put it right in the center," Daniel promised, helping her into the truck and buckling her seatbelt. "What do you want for dinner? Your choice tonight." "Pancakes. Pancakes aren't dinner food, baby." "You said my choice," Maya protested with the irrefutable logic of a 7-year-old. "I did say that," Daniel admitted, starting the truck. "Pancakes it is, but you're eating fruit with them." "Deal." They drove home to the small rental house Daniel could afford on a janitor's salary. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen where everything was slightly worn but clean. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, filled with Maya's artwork on the walls and photos of Sarah everywhere so their daughter would never forget her mother's face. While Daniel mixed pancake batter, Maya did her homework at the kitchen table, occasionally asking questions about fractions that made him remember how different childhood math had been in his generation. After dinner, pancakes with strawberries as promised, they settled on the couch for their evening ritual. 1 episode of whatever show Maya was into, followed by bedtime. Tonight, she wanted to watch a documentary about the Blue Angels she'd discovered. "Did you know they fly in formation with only 18 inches between their wings?" Maya asked, her eyes glued to the screen where FA-18 Hornets danced through the sky in perfect synchronization. 18 inches, Daddy! That's like this much! She held up her hands to demonstrate. "That's pretty close," Daniel agreed, his chest tight as he watched the jets wheel and spin. He remembered that kind of precision, the trust it required, the split-second timing where one mistake could end everything. "Do you think I could fly planes when I grow up?" Maya looked up at him with those serious gray eyes. "Mrs. Henderson says girls can do anything boys can do." "Mrs. Henderson is absolutely right," Daniel said firmly. "And you could fly anything you wanted. You're smart enough, brave enough. You'd be amazing." "Would Mommy be proud?" The question hit him like it always did, a familiar ache in a place that never quite healed. "Mommy would be so proud of you, she'd probably cry happy tears every single day." Maya snuggled closer, satisfied with this answer. On the screen, the Blue Angels pulled through a loop so tight it seemed to defy physics, and Daniel felt the old hunger again, that pull toward the sky that never quite left, no matter how many years you stayed grounded. After putting Maya to bed, reading her 2 chapters of the fantasy book they were working through together, and singing the lullaby Sarah used to sing, Daniel returned to the living room. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. He poured himself a glass of water and stood at the window, looking out at the mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Webb. "Videos at 2 million views. You're famous. Hope you're okay." Daniel typed back, "I'm fine. Thanks for checking." Another message. "For what it's worth, I looked you up. Or tried to. You're not easy to find, Daniel Reed." Daniel stared at those words for a long moment, then deleted them without responding. Some searches weren't meant to succeed. But as he got ready for bed, as he lay in the darkness listening to Maya's soft breathing from the room next door, Daniel knew something had shifted. Ariana Locke had meant to humiliate him, to use him as entertainment, to reinforce the hierarchy that kept people in their places. She'd laughed at the janitor, and the internet had laughed with her. What none of them understood was that Daniel Reed had stopped caring about being laughed at around the same time he'd learned that respect wasn't given. It was earned, often in ways invisible to those who'd never had to fight for it. The Valkyrie X7 needed someone to fly it. Someone brave enough, skilled enough, crazy enough to push it past comfortable limits and find out what it could really do. Ariana had no idea how right she'd been when she pointed at him and said those words. And tomorrow morning, when he returned to that hangar, when he pushed his cleaning cart past all those engineers who'd laughed, Daniel would still be invisible. But not for much longer. The sky was waiting, and the sky never forgot its own. The next morning arrived cold and sharp, the kind of November dawn that made breath visible and turned the mountains into jagged silhouettes against a lightning sky. Daniel dropped Maya at school with their usual ritual, a hug, a promise to pick her up on time, and a reminder to be brave even when math got hard. As he drove toward Horizon Aerotech, he felt something stirring in his chest that he hadn't felt in years, something dangerous and familiar all at once. The parking lot was already half full when he arrived, engineers and technicians starting early to solve problems that had festered overnight. Daniel parked in his usual spot far from the main building, the place where facility workers were expected to keep their aging vehicles away from the sleek Teslas and BMWs that marked executive territory. He sat in his truck for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the massive hangar that dominated the campus. Inside that building was the Valkyrie X7. Inside that building, Ariana Locke was probably already holding court, pushing her team toward an impossible deadline. And inside that building, something was about to change in ways none of them could anticipate. Daniel grabbed his thermos of coffee and headed in. The facility's office was a cramped room near the loading docks where the cleaning crew gathered each morning to receive assignments. His supervisor, a tired-looking woman named Carol, who'd worked at Horizon for 15 years, handed him his checklist without much ceremony. Main hangar, executive offices, and the engineering wing, she said. Rodriguez called in sick, so you're covering his areas too. No problem. Daniel? Carol looked at him with something like sympathy. I saw that video yesterday. The one with Ms. Locke. If you want to file a complaint with HR, it's fine, Carol, really. It's not fine. She humiliated you in front of the whole company, in front of millions of people online. Carol's mouth pressed into a thin line. I know you need this job, but you have rights. Daniel smiled, touched by her concern. I appreciate that, but trust me, I've dealt with worse than someone making a joke at my expense. Carol didn't look convinced, but she nodded. All right, but if you change your mind, my door is open. Well, metaphorically, I don't actually have a door. He made his way to the main hangar, pushing his cart through corridors that hummed with the early morning energy of a company racing against deadlines. Through windows, he could see engineers already clustered around computer screens, gesturing animatedly at simulations and data readouts. The pressure was mounting, and everyone could feel it. The hangar doors were open when Daniel arrived, and what he saw inside made him stop in his tracks. The Valkyrie X-7 sat in its usual position, but now it was surrounded by what looked like a war council. 20 or 30 people formed a loose circle around the helicopter, their voices creating a buzz of anxiety and frustration that echoed off the high ceiling. At the center stood Ariana Locke, still dressed in yesterday's power suit, like maybe she hadn't gone home at all, her expression carved from stone. James Hendricks, the chief test pilot, stood apart from the main group with his arms crossed defensively. Even from this distance, Daniel could see the exhaustion etched into every line of the man's face. So, let me understand this correctly, Ariana's voice cut through the chatter, silencing everyone. You're refusing to fly. I'm not refusing anything, ma'am, Hendricks said, his tone careful but firm. I'm telling you that until engineering resolves the control lag issue, test flights pose an unacceptable risk. Unacceptable to whom? You? The FAA? God? Ariana took a step closer to him. James, we hired you specifically because of your combat experience, because you've flown in conditions where people were actively trying to kill you, and now you're telling me a 0.4-second delay scares you more than surface-to-air missiles? With respect, ma'am, those are completely different scenarios. In combat, I knew my aircraft's limitations. I trusted my machine. Right now, I don't trust the Valkyrie's systems, and flying something you don't trust is how pilots die. A murmur ran through the assembled crowd. Daniel positioned his cart near the edge of the group, ostensibly to clean but really to listen. He recognized the dynamic playing out. A CEO who thought will could overcome physics, and a pilot who knew better but lacked the authority to make it stick. So what do you suggest? Ariana's voice dripped with sarcasm. We tell the Department of Defense that we need more time, that our revolutionary helicopter isn't quite ready because our star pilot has cold feet? I suggest we delay the demonstration by 60 days and fix the actual problems instead of pretending they don't exist. Hendricks straightened his shoulders, and Daniel saw the military bearing underneath the civilian clothes. Ma'am, I've been flying rotorcraft for 22 years. I know the difference between acceptable risk and suicide. Right now, pushing the Valkyrie past 60% power with these system lags is the latter. 60%, Ariana repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. So you're saying our $20 million prototype can only operate at 60% capacity? Until the engineers fix, the engineers have been fixing things for 6 months, James. At some point, we have to accept that perfection is the enemy of progress and actually demonstrate what this machine can do. Marcus Webb, standing near the helicopter with a tablet in his hands, cleared his throat. Ms. Locke, if I may. James has a point. The hydraulic integration issue isn't trivial. At high speeds or during aggressive maneuvers, the delay could cause the aircraft to... To what, Marcus? Crash? Explode? or just embarrass us in front of military procurement officers who are looking for any excuse to fund our competitors instead? Ariana spun to face her senior engineer. You've been with this company since my father founded it. Tell me honestly, is the Valkyrie safe to fly, yes or no? Marcus hesitated, and in that hesitation, Daniel saw the whole tragedy of the situation. The old engineer knew the truth, but also knew that truth wasn't what Ariana wanted to hear. It's safe at limited operational parameters, Marcus said finally, but pushing it to full demonstration specifications without addressing the control systems. I didn't ask for a technical lecture. I asked for yes or no. Then no, ma'am, not at full specs. The hangar went absolutely silent. Even the distant hum of ventilation systems seemed to quiet, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Ariana's face remained perfectly composed, but Daniel saw her hands clench at her sides. Fine, she said, her voice cold enough to frost the windows. If our chief test pilot won't fly the aircraft, and our senior engineer says it's not ready, then clearly we have a personnel problem, not a technology problem. James, you're dismissed. Hendrix's eyes widened. Ma'am? You heard me. Clean out your locker. HR will handle your severance. You're firing me for prioritizing safety? I'm firing you for failing to do the job I hired you to do. Anyone else want to tell me why we can't accomplish our mission? Ariana's gaze swept the assembled group, challenging them. No? Good. Someone find me a pilot who actually wants to fly instead of making excuses. We have 17 days until the DoD demonstration, and I will not lose this contract because everyone in this building forgot how to take risks. She started to walk away, her heels clicking sharply against the concrete, when a voice from the back of the crowd spoke up. Maybe you're looking in the wrong places. Every head turned. Daniel stood beside his cleaning cart, one hand resting on a bottle of glass cleaner, his expression calm. He hadn't meant to speak. The words had simply emerged, pulled out by the injustice of watching a good pilot get fired for being right. Ariana stopped mid-stride. Slowly, deliberately, she turned around. Excuse me? You said you're looking for a pilot, Daniel continued, his heart hammering but his voice steady. I'm just suggesting maybe you're looking in the wrong places. A ripple of recognition went through the crowd as people realized who had spoken. The janitor, the guy from yesterday's video. Several people actually laughed, assuming this was going to be entertainment. Oh, this is rich, someone muttered. Ariana walked back toward Daniel, her expression unreadable. Daniel Reed, wasn't it? The janitor I offered to marry yesterday if he could fly my helicopter? That's right, ma'am. And you're volunteering your expert opinion on where I should find pilots? She smiled, but there was something sharp underneath it. Tell me, Daniel, what do you know about aviation that I don't? This was the moment. The edge of the cliff where he could step back into safety and invisibility, or step forward into whatever came next. Daniel thought of Maya, of the life he'd carefully built from the ruins of his old one. He thought of Sarah, who'd always told him that hiding from who you were didn't honor the sacrifices that had brought you there. I know that good pilots trust their instincts, Daniel said quietly, and Mr. Hendrix's instincts are telling him something's wrong. Firing him doesn't fix the helicopter. It just means you'll have to find someone else to ignore the same problems. The laughter died. Ariana's smile faded completely. You're lecturing me about aviation? You? No, ma'am. Just pointing out what's obvious. What's obvious, Ariana repeated, her voice rising, is that everyone in this building thinks they know better than me how to run my company. My father built Horizon from nothing, and when he died, people said I'd destroy it within a year. Instead, I've doubled our revenue and landed contracts with 3 branches of the military. So forgive me if I don't take business advice from someone whose job is to empty trash cans. The words were designed to sting, to put him back in his place. But Daniel had been called worse by people who'd earned the right to judge him. Ariana Locke, for all her intelligence and drive, hadn't earned anything except the fortune her father left her. You're right, Daniel said. I empty trash cans. But I also watch, and I listen, and I see things that people higher up the chain miss because they're too busy performing for each other. Like what? Like the fact that everyone in this hangar is terrified to tell you the truth because the last person who did just got fired. Daniel gestured at the crowd. You want someone to fly the Valkyrie? Fine. But make sure they're flying it because it's safe, not because they're more afraid of disappointing you than dying. The hangar was so quiet now that Daniel could hear his own heartbeat. He'd crossed a line. He knew that. Come tomorrow, Carol would probably be handing him a pink slip along with his final paycheck. But watching Hendricks get fired for doing his job right had awakened something in Daniel that he'd thought was dead, the part of him that couldn't stand by while bad leadership destroyed good people. Ariana stared at him for a long moment, her expression cycling through anger, disbelief, and something that might have been respect before settling back on anger. "You know what?" she said finally. "You want to criticize how I find pilots? You want to stand there and tell me I'm doing everything wrong? Fine. Let's revisit yesterday's offer. Fly the Valkyrie, Daniel, right now. Prove that you know what you're talking about." The crowd stirred, confusion mixing with anticipation. Someone started recording on their phone. "Ma'am." Marcus started to intervene, but Ariana held up a hand. "No, I'm serious. Daniel here thinks he understands aviation better than our chief test pilot. So let's test that. Get in the cockpit, start the engine, and show us what you know." She moved closer to him, close enough that he could see the exhaustion behind her eyes, the desperation driving her. Unless, of course, you were just talking, which seems likely for someone whose expertise is in cleaning supplies. Daniel looked at the Valkyrie X7. In the morning light streaming through the hangar's high windows, it looked like something from a dream, sleek, powerful, dangerous. His hands remembered the feel of a cyclic stick, the delicate pressure needed on rudder pedals, the constant adjustments that kept a helicopter in the sky. It had been 5 years since his last flight, 5 years since the injury that ended his career. But some things lived in muscle memory, in the parts of yourself that couldn't forget, even when forgetting would be easier. "If I do this," Daniel said slowly, "and I fly it successfully, you'll reconsider firing Mr. Hendricks and actually listen to what your engineers are telling you about the safety issues." Ariana's eyebrows rose. "If you fly it successfully, I'll do more than that. I'll keep my original promise. We'll pick a wedding date." The crowd erupted in shocked laughter and excited chatter. This was better than yesterday's video. This was content gold. The janitor actually accepting the CEO's challenge. It would go mega viral within hours. "I'm not interested in marrying you, ma'am," Daniel said calmly. "I just want you to treat your people with respect and prioritize safety over ego." "How noble! So is that a yes or a no?" Daniel set down his glass cleaner. He looked at Marcus, who was watching him with intense curiosity, then at Hendricks, who looked horrified at the idea of an untrained janitor attempting to fly a prototype aircraft. Finally, he looked back at Ariana. "It's a yes," he said. "But I want everyone to be clear. I'm not doing this as a stunt. If I get in that cockpit, I'm treating it like a real test flight, which means I follow proper procedures and I don't take unnecessary risks." "Whatever you need," Ariana said, waving her hand dismissively. "Though I assume you'll need someone to explain how the controls work. Maybe Marcus can give you a quick tutorial on which pedal makes it go up." More laughter. Daniel ignored it and walked toward the Valkyrie, his stride changing as he moved. The shuffle of a janitor fell away, replaced by something more purposeful, more controlled. He circled the aircraft slowly, and this time people noticed the way he moved, not like someone seeing it for the first time, but like someone conducting a pre-flight inspection. He checked the main rotor for play, examined the tail rotor assembly, looked at the landing gear struts for hydraulic leaks. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, touching points that needed checking, his eyes scanning for anything that might indicate a problem. Marcus moved to stand beside him. "Daniel," the old engineer said quietly, "you don't have to do this. She's being cruel." "I know what she's being," Daniel replied, continuing his inspection. "But the question stands, can this aircraft fly safely, or can't it? At conservative parameters with an experienced pilot, yes, but you're not." Marcus stopped, really looking at Daniel for the first time. At the way he was checking the swash plate bearings, the way his eyes tracked the control linkages. "Wait, you actually know what you're doing." "I told you," Daniel said. "Once upon a time." "Once upon a time what? Daniel, who are you?" Before Daniel could answer, Ariana called out impatiently. "Are we doing this or not? Some of us have actual work to do today." Daniel finished his walk around and approached the cockpit. The door was open, and he climbed in with the easy familiarity of someone who had done it thousands of times before. The seat needed adjustment. Whoever had flown last was taller, so he shifted it forward and down. His feet found the pedals naturally, his right hand settling on the cyclic like greeting an old friend. The collective was where it should be on his left, the throttle integrated into the grip exactly where his muscle memory expected it. The instrument panel was more modern than anything he'd flown before, all glass displays instead of analog gauges, but the fundamental layout was familiar. Attitude indicator, airspeed, altitude, heading, vertical speed, all the instruments that told a pilot where they were and where they were going. "Someone want to tell him how to start it?" Ariana asked, her tone mocking. "Or should we let him figure it out through trial and error?" Daniel's hands moved across the overhead panel, flipping switches in the precise sequence burned into his memory from thousands of hours of flight time. Battery master on. Fuel pumps engaged. He checked the fire detection system, the hydraulic pressure gauges, the transmission oil temperature. The crowd had gone quiet again, watching him work. Even the people recording on their phones seemed confused by what they were seeing. "He's doing the startup sequence," someone whispered. "How does he know the startup sequence?" Daniel reached for the engine start button, then paused. He looked out the cockpit at Ariana, who stood with her arms crossed, still expecting this to be a joke that ended with him embarrassed and her vindicated. "Last chance to reconsider," he called out. "Once I start this engine, I'm committed to the flight." "By all means," Ariana gestured grandly. "Commit away." Daniel pressed the start button. The Valkyrie's turbine began to wind up, the whine building from a whisper to a scream as the engine came to life. The main rotor started turning slowly, heavy blades cutting through the morning air with a distinctive whop, whop, whop that echoed through the hangar. People backed away instinctively as the rotor wash began to pick up, papers scattering, hair whipping. Daniel watched his instruments carefully, monitoring temperature, pressure, RPM, everything climbing smoothly into the green. The helicopter shook slightly as systems came online, the vibration familiar and almost comforting. He let the engine stabilize, let the transmission oil come up to operating temperature, following the procedures that had been drilled into him over decades of flying. Through the windscreen, he could see Ariana's confident expression starting to crack, uncertainty creeping in around the edges. Marcus ran up to the cockpit, shouting over the noise, "Daniel, seriously, what's going on? You can't just fly a prototype helicopter without training." "I'm not without training," Daniel shouted back. "Marcus, I need you to clear the hangar, get everyone back to a safe distance. But please trust me." Something in Daniel's eyes must have convinced him. Marcus stumbled back, waving his arms, shouting for people to clear out. The crowd retreated toward the hangar walls, though no one left. This was too good to miss. Ariana remained in the center of the open space, refusing to move, as if acknowledging the danger would mean admitting she'd misjudged the situation. Daniel increased the collective slowly, feeling the Valkyrie's response. The skids lifted slightly off the concrete, just an inch, testing the aircraft's balance. The control lag that Hendricks had complained about was there, a tiny delay between his input and the helicopter's reaction, but nothing that couldn't be compensated for with proper technique. He brought it back down gently, then tried the cyclic, nudging the aircraft forward and back, feeling how it wanted to move. The tail rotor responded crisply to pedal inputs, the heading holding steady. Despite the control system issues, the Valkyrie was beautifully balanced, the engineering fundamentally sound. "All systems green," he said to himself, checking the displays one more time. Transmission temp normal. Engine parameters nominal. Hydraulic pressure good. He glanced at Ariana, who was still standing there, her expression now frozen somewhere between shock and dawning realization. "Ma'am," Daniel called out, "I strongly suggest you step back." She didn't move. Pride, stubbornness, or simple disbelief kept her rooted in place. "Your choice," Daniel muttered. He pulled in more collective, added throttle, and felt the Valkyrie leave the ground for real this time. The skids rose smoothly, 3 feet, 6 feet, 10 feet. The helicopter hung in the air above the hangar floor, perfectly balanced in a hover that would have been impressive in any aircraft, but was remarkable in a prototype being flown for the first time by someone they thought was just a janitor. The rotor wash blasted outward, strong enough now to make Ariana finally stumble backward. her perfectly styled hair whipping into chaos. She raised a hand to shield her face, her expression cycling rapidly through emotions Daniel couldn't read from this height. He held the hover, making small corrections with practiced ease, feeling the Valkyrie's personality. Every helicopter had one. The way it wanted to turn, how it responded to wind, the small quirks that made it unique. The X-7 wanted to nose left slightly, compensation needed in the collective for a tendency to climb, but nothing that suggested fundamental instability. Through the windscreen, Daniel could see the entire crowd pressed against the hangar walls, phones raised, faces shocked. He could see Marcus with his hands over his mouth. He could see Hendricks staring with the expression of a man watching the laws of physics rewrite themselves. And he could see Ariana standing alone in the center of the hangar floor, looking up at him with eyes that had finally understood this was no joke. Daniel adjusted his grip on the cyclic and began to move. He started with basics: forward flight at low speed, a slow circuit around the interior of the hangar. The Valkyrie responded beautifully, despite the control lag, tracking smoothly. He transitioned into a hover turn, rotating the aircraft through 360 degrees with precision that required thousands of hours to make look easy. The hangar was large enough for him to demonstrate basic maneuvers without pushing into dangerous territory. He did a backward hover, which was one of the hardest skills to master because you couldn't see where you were going. He did pedal turns in both directions. He brought the aircraft sideways across the length of the hangar, maintaining perfect altitude control. Each maneuver was executed with the kind of precision that separates military pilots from civilians, that distinguishes people who fly for fun from people who've flown in places where mistakes had permanent consequences. Daniel wasn't showing off. He was simply demonstrating competence, proving a point that needed proving. After 5 minutes that felt simultaneously like seconds and hours, he brought the Valkyrie back to center and began his descent. The touchdown was feather soft, the skids kissing concrete with barely a whisper. Daniel rolled the throttle back, wound down the engine, and watched the rotors slow gradually from a blur to individual blades, then to stillness. In the sudden silence that followed, no one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the tick of cooling metal and the hammer of Daniel's heartbeat in his ears. He completed the shutdown checklist with the same methodical care he'd used for startup, making sure every system was properly secured. Only then did he unbuckle, open the cockpit door, and climb out. His legs were steadier than he'd expected after 5 years away from the cockpit, his body remembering how to handle the adrenaline that always came with flight. The crowd remained frozen as Daniel walked across the hangar floor toward Ariana. She stood exactly where the rotor wash had pushed her, her clothes disheveled, her hair wild, her carefully constructed armor of authority completely shattered. He stopped a few feet from her, maintaining respectful distance. "The control lag Hendricks mentioned is real," Daniel said quietly, his voice carrying in the silence. "It's manageable with proper compensation, but at high speeds or during aggressive maneuvers, it could definitely cause problems. Your engineers are right to be concerned. The hydraulic integration needs work before you push this aircraft to its limits." Ariana opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Who the hell are you?" she finally whispered. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. From it, he extracted a laminated military ID card that he'd carried for 20 years and couldn't quite bring himself to throw away even after retirement. He handed it to her. Ariana looked down at the card. Her eyes went wide as she read, "Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Reed, United States Air Force, Tactical Flight Instructor." "I flew Blackhawks for 12 years, Daniel said. "Combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. After that, I taught advanced rotary wing tactics at Fort Rucker for 8 years. I have just over 9,000 hours of flight time in military helicopters, plus another 1,500 in civilian aircraft. I'm rated on 14 different platforms and hold instructor certifications for 6 of them." The words fell into the silence like stones into still water, sending ripples of shock through everyone who heard them. Ariana stared at the ID card as if it might be fake, as if reality might rearrange itself back into something that made sense. "But you're—" she started. "A janitor," Daniel finished. "Yes, ma'am. Because 5 years ago, I took a piece of shrapnel in my back during a rescue operation outside Kabul. It damaged nerves that left me with chronic pain and occasional loss of sensation in my left leg. The Air Force gave me a medical retirement with full honors, but flying wasn't an option anymore. And 6 months after that, my wife Sarah died of cancer, leaving me with a 7-year-old daughter to raise alone. He took the ID card back from Ariana's numb fingers and returned it to his wallet. I took this job because it pays enough to cover rent and Maya's school supplies, because the health insurance helped with my medical bills, and because I didn't want to be around aviation anymore. Seeing these aircraft every day, being close to flying but not able to do it myself, it hurt. But it was honest work that let me be home for my daughter, and that was all that mattered. Marcus had moved closer during this speech, tears streaming unashamedly down his weathered face. Around them, the assembled crowd stood in various states of shock, shame, and dawning understanding. "You flew combat missions," Ariana said, her voice barely audible. "You saved lives. You taught others to fly. And I called you. I said you didn't know," Daniel said simply. "How could you? I'm wearing a janitor's uniform. I push a cleaning cart. You saw what was visible and made assumptions based on that, which is what humans do." The problem wasn't the assumptions, ma'am. The problem was using those assumptions to humiliate someone for entertainment. Ariana's face had gone pale. She looked around at the phones still recording, at the faces watching her, and seemed to fully comprehend what had just happened. Not just in this hangar, but captured on video that would spread across the internet like wildfire. "I need to sit down," she said faintly. Marcus rushed to get her a chair. Someone else brought water. The crowd began to murmur, conversations breaking out as people processed what they'd witnessed. Daniel heard fragments. "Holy shit! Did you see that landing? 9,000 hours. Combat pilot." Hendricks approached, his expression complex. "Colonel Reed, sir. That was... I don't even have words. Just Daniel is fine, and you were right about the control systems. That lag is going to bite someone at high speeds. But you compensated for it like it was nothing. Years of practice compensating for much worse problems in much worse conditions." Daniel managed a tired smile. "But that doesn't mean it's safe for operational use, especially not for civilian pilots who haven't spent a decade learning to adapt to failing systems in combat zones." Ariana looked up from her chair, her face haggard. "I fired James for telling the truth. I was going to risk demonstrating an unsafe aircraft rather than admit we needed more time. I humiliated you in front of millions of people. And you," she shook her head, "you just proved you're better than all of us." "I didn't prove anything except that I can still fly a helicopter," Daniel said. "What you do with that information is up to you, ma'am. But if you're asking my professional opinion, delay the DoD demonstration by 60 days, fix the hydraulic integration issue properly, then demonstrate an aircraft you can be genuinely proud of instead of one you're just hoping doesn't crash in front of procurement officers." The hangar doors opened and Carol rushed in, clearly having been called by someone. She took one look at Daniel standing beside the Valkyrie, at Ariana slumped in a chair, at the crowd of shocked engineers, and stopped in her tracks. "What the hell happened here?" "Daniel flew the prototype," Marcus said, wonder still in his voice. "He just flew it, like it was the easiest thing in the world." Carol turned to Daniel, her expression cycling from confusion to understanding. "You can fly helicopters." "Yes, ma'am? And you've been cleaning toilets for 6 months. They needed cleaning." Carol started to laugh, the kind of slightly hysterical laughter that comes when reality becomes too absurd to process normally. "You're telling me we had a military pilot working in facilities and nobody knew?" "I didn't advertise it," Daniel said with a shrug. "Wasn't relevant to the job I was hired to do." "Relevant?" Ariana's voice cracked as she stood up from the chair. "Daniel, you could have been testing our aircraft this whole time. You could have been helping us solve these problems. Instead, you were mopping floors while we struggled to find qualified pilots." "You never asked," Daniel said simply. "You saw a janitor, and that was all you needed to see, which, again, I understand. But it's a reminder that people contain multitudes, ma'am. The person emptying your trash might be a combat veteran. The person serving your coffee might have a PhD. The dignity of their current work doesn't diminish what they've accomplished before or what they're capable of now." The silence that followed was different from before, not shocked, but contemplative. Around the hangar, people were looking at each other differently. perhaps wondering what stories they'd overlooked, what capabilities they'd dismissed. Ariana walked slowly to the Valkyrie and placed her hand on its fuselage, the same way Daniel had done the day before. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. I need to apologize. Not just to you, Daniel, but to everyone. To James, who I fired for doing his job correctly. To our engineering team, who I've been bullying instead of supporting. To every person who works for this company who I've treated as less important because of their role rather than their humanity. She turned to face the crowd. My father built Horizon on the principle that innovation requires respect. Respect for the work, respect for the science, and respect for the people doing both. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I got so focused on success that I stopped caring about how we achieved it. She looked at Daniel. I made a joke about marrying you if you could fly my helicopter. Obviously, that was inappropriate and demeaning, but I did make a promise, and I'd like to keep at least part of it, if you'll allow me. Stay after we're done here. Let's talk about how you might actually contribute to this project in a meaningful way. I have to pick up my daughter from school at 3, Daniel said. Then we'll talk before 3, please. Daniel considered, then nodded. All right. Ariana raised her voice to address everyone. This demonstration is over. I want the engineering team to compile a complete report on all outstanding issues with the Valkyrie, no matter how minor. James, if you're willing to stay, I'd like to reinstate you and hear your full recommendations. Everyone else, take the morning to process what just happened, and let's regroup this afternoon with honest conversations about what we need to do differently. People began to disperse slowly, still talking among themselves, still processing. The phones had stopped recording, but Daniel knew the footage was already spreading. The janitor, who turned out to be a military pilot, the CEO humbled, the helicopter rising into the air against all expectations. It would be a different kind of viral moment than yesterday's video. As the crowd thinned, Marcus approached Daniel with an expression of profound respect. Colonel Reed, just Daniel, please. I'm not active duty anymore. Daniel, then. I looked you up last night after our conversation, but I couldn't find much. You're not easy to search for. I tried to keep a low profile after Sarah died. Didn't want the attention or the sympathy. Your wife, I'm so sorry. Thank you. Daniel glanced at his watch. I should get back to work. Carol's going to wonder where I disappeared to. You're still planning to clean? Marcus looked astonished. After everything that just happened? My shift doesn't end until 3, and I'm still getting paid to do a job. Why wouldn't I clean? Marcus shook his head slowly. You're a remarkable person, Daniel Reed. Truly remarkable. Daniel just smiled and retrieved his cleaning cart from where he'd left it. As he pushed it toward the exit, Ariana called after him. Daniel, 2 o'clock, my office. Don't make me regret asking nicely. Yes, ma'am, 2 o'clock. He spent the rest of the morning completing his assigned tasks, executive offices, engineering wing, bathrooms, and break rooms. People stared at him differently now, nodding with respect when he passed, some even saying hello or thank you. It was disconcerting, this sudden visibility, like someone had flipped a switch and he'd gone from ghost to person overnight. At noon, he sat in his truck eating the sandwich he'd packed that morning, checking his phone to find 73 text messages from numbers he didn't recognize and 6 voicemails. The video had gone even more viral than yesterday's, but this time the narrative was different. This time, people weren't laughing at the janitor. They were celebrating him and questioning why someone with his qualifications had been invisible in the first place. One text stood out from a number with a Fort Rucker area code. Saw the video. Always knew you'd end up back in the sky somehow, Colonel. Proud of you. Chief Warrant Officer Martinez. Daniel smiled, remembering Martinez, one of his best students who'd gone on to become an instructor himself. He typed back, just proved an old dog can still hunt. Give my regards to everyone at Mother Rucker. At 1:55 p.m., Daniel knocked on Ariana Locke's office door. Through the frosted glass, he could see her silhouette pacing. Come in, she called. The office was everything Daniel expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains, modern furniture in shades of gray and chrome, walls covered with photos of Horizon aircraft, and awards from industry organizations. Ariana stood by the window, her back to him, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. Close the door, she said without turning. Daniel did, then waited. He'd learned in the military that sometimes the best thing to say was nothing. "I've been CEO for 5 years," Ariana said finally. 5 years of people telling me I'm too young, too inexperienced, too female to run an aerospace company. Every decision gets scrutinized. Every mistake gets magnified. So I built armor, made myself harder, more aggressive, more willing to humiliate others before they could humiliate me. She turned to face him. "But what I did to you wasn't armor. It was cruelty, and there's no excuse for cruelty." "Apology accepted," Daniel said simply. "Just like that?" "You made a mistake. You owned it publicly. You're taking steps to fix it. What else is there?" Ariana laughed, but it was shaky. "Most people would want me to grovel more." "I'm not most people." "No," she agreed. "You're really not." She gestured to a chair. "Please, sit. Let's talk about your future at Horizon. If you want one here." Daniel sat, and they began to negotiate the next chapter of both their lives. Daniel studied Ariana across the expanse of her chrome and glass desk, watching her pull herself together with visible effort. The woman who'd strutted through the hangar that morning with absolute confidence now sat with slumped shoulders, her carefully constructed armor cracked wide open. She pulled out a leather portfolio and opened it to a blank page, pen poised like she was about to negotiate a contract. "Before we start," Daniel said quietly, "I need to be clear about something. I'm not looking to be rescued or elevated. I have a daughter who needs stability, and the job I have now provides that. Whatever we discuss here needs to work around Maya first." Ariana set down her pen. "How old is she?" 7. Second grade at Mountain View Elementary. She's smart, funny, and the only thing in this world that matters more to me than flying." "What happened to her mother? You said cancer?" The question landed gently, but it still hurt the way it always hurt. "Pancreatic. Diagnosed stage 4 6 months after they found it. Sarah lasted 8 months after that, and she fought every single day." Daniel's voice remained steady through years of practice. "Maya was 2 when Sarah died. She has pictures and videos, stories I tell her every night, but she doesn't really remember her mother. That's the part that keeps me awake sometimes. Knowing that the most important person in her life is becoming a beautiful story instead of a living memory." Ariana's eyes glistened. "I'm sorry, that's inadequate, but I don't know what else to say." "There isn't anything else to say. Loss is loss, and you carry it, or it carries you." Daniel shifted in his chair. "After Sarah died, I had disability payments from the Air Force, her life insurance, and a 7-figure offer from Lockheed to consult on their next-generation attack helicopter. I could have taken that job, put Maya in the best schools, hired nannies and therapists, and all the support money can buy. But you didn't." "No. Because Maya didn't need the best schools or expensive therapists. She needed her father. She needed someone to make her breakfast and pick her up from school and tuck her in at night. She needed consistency and presence, not resources." He met Ariana's gaze directly. "So I took the janitor job because the hours are 6 to 3, which means I'm home when she needs me. That's not a sacrifice, Miss Locke. That's a privilege. And before we talk about any changes, I need to know that privilege stays intact." Ariana nodded slowly, making a note. "Understood. So if I were to offer you a position as chief test pilot, I'd decline." She looked up sharply. "What?" "Daniel, you just demonstrated skills that most pilots spend their entire careers trying to develop. We need someone exactly like you to work 12-hour days testing an aircraft through every possible failure mode while you race toward a deadline?" Daniel shook his head. "I've done that life, Miss Locke. I've missed birthdays and recitals and first days of school because the mission came first. I've told my family that duty required sacrifice, and I believed it because the stakes were real. People's lives depended on getting it right. But that was when I had a wife who understood and supported those choices. Now I'm the only parent Maya has, and no amount of money or prestige is worth missing her childhood." The silence that followed was heavy with Ariana's visible struggle between her needs and respecting his boundaries. Finally, she said, "What if we structure it differently? Flexible hours, primarily consulting rather than active testing, the ability to work from home when needed." "Why do you want me here at all?" Daniel asked. "You have qualified pilots. James Hendricks is excellent, and if you treat him with respect instead of contempt, He'll help you build something remarkable. You don't need me. But I do, Ariana insisted, leaning forward. Daniel, what happened this morning? That wasn't just about flying. You diagnosed the problem, understood the human dynamics, and demonstrated leadership without ever raising your voice or pulling rank. You showed everyone in that hangar, including me, what integrity looks like under pressure. I showed you how to fly a helicopter. You showed us how to be better people, Ariana corrected. And Horizon needs that right now. I need that. Because the truth is, I've built a culture of fear where the best people are afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. You weren't afraid, and maybe if you're around, other people will learn to be unafraid too. Daniel considered this, recognizing the truth in her words but also the danger. It would be easy to step back into the world he'd left behind, to reclaim the identity that had defined him for 20 years. But that world had nearly destroyed him when it ended, and rebuilding himself into someone who could be present for his daughter had required more strength than any combat mission. I'll consult, he said finally. Part-time, flexible hours, primarily focused on test program design and safety protocols. I'll help you fix the Valkyrie's problems and prepare for the DoD demonstration. But I won't be your chief test pilot, and I won't be anyone's savior. I'm just a guy who knows helicopters and thinks your company could be better than it is. Ariana smiled, genuine warmth breaking through her professional facade. I'll take it. What would you need in terms of compensation? Whatever's fair. I'm not trying to get rich. I just need enough to take care of Maya and maybe put some away for her college fund. Daniel, you're a lieutenant colonel with combat experience and instructor credentials. Fair compensation would be more than I need, he interrupted. Ms. Locke, I appreciate the gesture, but one of the things I learned after leaving the military is that enough is a real number. I don't need more than enough. Use the extra money to raise wages for the rest of your facilities staff, the people who've been keeping this place running while everyone else was busy building aircraft. Ariana stared at him like he'd started speaking a foreign language. You want me to pay other people with money that should be yours? I want you to recognize that the woman who cleans your office deserves to afford rent without working 3 jobs. I want you to understand that the guy who maintains your HVAC systems has just as much dignity as your senior engineers. If me taking this consulting role means you finally see the people you've been looking through, then yeah, spread the wealth around. She was quiet for a long moment, then wrote something in her portfolio with deliberate strokes. Okay, part-time consulting with flexible hours, competitive but not excessive compensation, and I'll conduct a comprehensive review of wages and benefits for all support staff. Anything else? James Hendricks keeps his job and gets a formal apology. Your engineering team gets the time they need to fix problems properly instead of being bullied into cutting corners. And the next time someone tells you something you don't want to hear, you thank them for their honesty instead of firing them. You're negotiating my management style now. I'm giving you the conditions under which I'm willing to work here. Take them or leave them, Ms. Locke. I've got offices to clean and a daughter to pick up in 45 minutes. Ariana laughed, a real laugh that transformed her face from severe to something approaching beautiful. My father used to say the best deals are the ones where everyone walks away slightly uncomfortable. I think he would have liked you, Daniel. I would have liked to meet him. Marcus speaks highly of his vision. Dad was brilliant, but he was also kind. He would have been horrified by what I did to you yesterday. Ariana's expression clouded. He would have been ashamed of the leader I've become. Then don't be that leader anymore, Daniel said simply. You can't change yesterday, but you control what happens next. That's true for all of us. She nodded, then stood and extended her hand across the desk. Thank you, Daniel, for the flight, for the honesty, and for giving me a chance to do better. They shook hands, and Daniel felt the firmness of her grip, the steadiness that came from making a decision and committing to it. Whatever else Ariana Locke was, she wasn't weak. She'd just been using her strength in the wrong directions. I'll draft a formal offer letter tonight and have it to you tomorrow, she said. But before you go, there's something else we need to discuss. What's that? The video. Both videos, actually. The first one has 20 million views now, and this morning's already has 15 million. You're famous, Daniel, whether you wanted to be or not. And that fame is going to bring attention, media requests, interview offers, Probably people showing up at your house. Daniel's stomach tightened. He'd been so focused on the immediate situation that he hadn't considered the broader implications. I don't want to be famous. I know, but the internet doesn't care what you want. Right now, you're the feel-good story of the year, the humble janitor who is secretly a hero. People love that narrative. They want to hear more, know more, see more. They can want all day long. I'm not interested in performing my life for strangers. I respect that, but I also want to offer you resources to handle what's coming. Horizon has a PR team that can help manage media requests, security consultants who can help protect your privacy, legal support if anyone tries to exploit your story. You don't have to accept, but the offer stands. Daniel thought of Maya, of reporters potentially approaching her at school, of strangers recognizing him at the grocery store. His anonymity had been armor, and now that armor was gone. I'll think about it, he said. But right now, I need to pick up my daughter and explain why her dad is suddenly on the internet. Ariana walked him to the door. For what it's worth, I think Maya is very lucky. A lot of fathers would have used their skills and credentials to climb back to the top, even if it meant sacrificing time with their kids. You chose differently. It wasn't really a choice, it was just being a parent. He left her office and walked back through the facility, keenly aware of how different the hallway felt. People who'd never made eye contact before now nodded respectfully. A woman from accounting actually stopped him to say thank you, though for what she didn't specify. The invisible man had become suddenly, uncomfortably visible. Carol was waiting by his locker in the facilities office. So, what happened? I'm going to be a part-time consultant. Help them fix their test program, improve safety protocols, flexible hours so I can still be there for Maya. That's wonderful, Daniel. You deserve... She stopped, looking at his expression. You're not happy about it. I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm glad Ariana is willing to make changes. But Carol, I liked being invisible. I liked coming to work, doing my job, going home to my daughter. Simple, uncomplicated. Now everything's complicated again. Carol sat down on the bench beside the lockers. You know what I think? I think you've been hiding. Not from other people, but from yourself. You loved flying, loved the military, loved being Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Reed. When you lost that, when Sarah died, you decided the safest thing was to become someone completely different. But you can't unbecome who you are, Daniel. It doesn't work that way. I'm not trying to unbecome anything. I'm just trying to be a good father. And you are. The best. But maybe, and I say this with love, maybe Maya needs to see all of who her father is. Not just the guy who makes pancakes and helps with homework, but the man who flew combat missions and saved lives and can make a $20 million helicopter dance like it's weightless. Daniel sat down beside her, suddenly tired. What if I fail? What if I get back into that world and discover I can't do it anymore? The injury, the time away, the fact that my instincts might not be as sharp as they were. Then you fail, and you learn, and you try again. That's what you'd tell Maya, isn't it? That failure is just part of trying. She was right, of course. Daniel had given Maya that exact speech when she'd been afraid to audition for the school play, terrified of not getting a part. He told her that brave people aren't the ones who never feel fear. They're the ones who do it anyway. When did you get so wise? He asked. I've been cleaning up other people's messes for 15 years. You learn things about human nature. Daniel checked his watch. I need to get Maya. But Carol, thank you. For checking on me this morning, for being someone who saw me as a person before you knew anything about my past. That mattered more than you know. That's because I'm brilliant, Carol said with a wink. Now go get your daughter. And Daniel, whatever happens next, you've got people in your corner. Don't forget that. The drive to Mountain View Elementary was familiar and comforting, the route so ingrained that Daniel could have driven it in his sleep. He parked in his usual spot and waited with the cluster of other parents, most absorbed in their phones. A few looked up at him with recognition, and he realized the video had spread far enough that even random parents at his daughter's school had probably seen it. Excuse me, a woman approached tentatively. Are you the helicopter guy? I'm Maya Reed's father, Daniel said carefully. Right, of course. I just wanted to say, my dad was in the Air Force too. What you did today, standing up for yourself with dignity, It meant a lot to see that. Thank you. Before Daniel could respond, the school bell rang and children flooded out. Maya appeared in her usual spot, purple backpack bouncing, but today she was surrounded by a cluster of other kids all talking excitedly. When she spotted Daniel, she ran over with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Daddy, everyone at school is saying you're famous. They say you flew a helicopter and you were in the Army and you're on the internet. Air Force, not Army. And yes, something happened at work today that got recorded and shared online." "Can I see?" Maya's eyes were huge with excitement. "Let's talk about it at home, Butterfly. Come on." In the truck, Maya was unusually quiet, and Daniel could see her processing something big. Finally, as they pulled into their driveway, she said, "Were you really a pilot? Like the Blue Angels?" "Different kind of pilot. I flew helicopters, not jets. And yes, I did that for a long time before you were born." "Why didn't you tell me?" The question was fair and hurt more than Daniel had expected. "Because it was complicated, baby. After Mommy died, I had to stop flying because I got hurt. And it made me sad to think about, so I tried not to think about it at all. I should have told you. I'm sorry." Maya was quiet for another moment, then said, "Were you happy when you were flying?" "Yes, very happy." "Are you happy now?" Daniel looked at his daughter's serious face and felt his heart crack open. "I'm happy because I have you. But you're right that I've been sad about other things. Sometimes adults don't do a good job of dealing with their feelings, and we hide parts of ourselves because we think it will hurt less. But all it does is make us smaller. Mrs. Henderson says we should be our whole selves, not just the parts we think people will like." Mrs. Henderson is very smart, and yes, that's true. I've been trying to be just one part of myself, just your dad, because I thought that would be enough. But maybe I need to be all the parts. The dad and the pilot and the person who misses flying and the person who's building a new life, all of it together. Maya nodded sagely, then brightened. "Can you teach me to fly when I'm older?" "If that's what you want, absolutely." "And will you tell me stories about when you were in the Air Force? Real stories, not just the sad ones about Mommy?" "I will. I promise." They went inside and Daniel made them an early dinner while Maya did homework at the kitchen table. She kept sneaking glances at him like she was seeing him differently, trying to reconcile the father she'd always known with this new information about who he'd been before. It reminded Daniel that children are constantly rewriting their understanding of the world, incorporating new data, adjusting their mental models of reality. After dinner, Maya wanted to see the video. Daniel hesitated, then pulled it up on his phone. The two of them crowded together on the couch. They watched the helicopter rise into the air, watched it hover and turn and move with precision that made Maya gasp. "That's really you flying? That's really me. You're really good, Daddy." "Thank you, Butterfly." They watched in silence as the video showed the landing, the reveal of Daniel's military ID, Ariana's shocked expression. When it ended, Maya looked up at him with something like awe. "You're kind of like a superhero." Daniel laughed despite himself. "I'm not a superhero, I'm just someone who learned to fly helicopters and tried to do it well." "Superheroes always say stuff like that," Maya insisted. "They always pretend they're normal, but everyone else knows they're special." "Well, if I'm a superhero, you're my superpower. Everything I do so I can be the dad you deserve." Maya snuggled against him, satisfied with this answer. They watched 2 episodes of her current favorite show. Then Daniel carried her to bed, even though she was probably too old for that. He read their book, sang the lullaby, and kissed her forehead. "Daddy," Maya said as he was leaving, "I'm glad people know you're special now. I always knew, but it's good that other people know too." "I love you, Maya Reed." "Love you more." Daniel closed her door and returned to the living room, where he finally allowed himself to check his phone properly. The messages had multiplied. 149 unread texts, dozens of missed calls, voicemails from numbers he didn't recognize, and several he did. News outlets requesting interviews. A production company wanting to discuss a documentary. Former Air Force colleagues reaching out to say they'd seen the video. And buried in the middle, a text from a blocked number that just said, "You always did know how to make an entrance, sir. Glad you found your way back to the sky." Daniel stared at that message for a long time, trying to place the voice behind the words. The phrasing suggested someone who'd served under him, but the block number made identification impossible. It could have been any of the hundreds of pilots he'd trained over the years, any of the crew members he'd flown with, any of the soldiers whose lives had intersected with his in those intense years when flying was everything. He was about to set the phone down when it rang, displaying a number with a DC area code. Against his better judgment, Daniel answered. "Lieutenant Colonel Reed?" The voice was crisp, professional, military. "Just Daniel Reed now. Who's calling?" "Major General Patricia Hawkins, Air Force Personnel Center. I apologize for calling so late, but after seeing today's video, I felt it was important to reach out personally." Daniel's back straightened automatically, old instincts kicking in. "General Hawkins, what can I do for you?" "Actually, Colonel, I'm calling to discuss what the Air Force can do for you. Your medical retirement was processed 5 years ago with a 70% disability rating due to nerve damage and chronic pain. However, medical review boards are constantly reassessing cases as treatment options improve. I've been looking at your file, and I'm wondering if you'd be interested in a medical reevaluation." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. "You're saying I might be able to fly again? Officially?" "I'm saying it's worth exploring. The video shows none of the physical limitations that were cited in your retirement paperwork. Obviously, you'd need to undergo a full evaluation at Wright-Patterson Medical Center, but if the nerve damage has healed more than initially projected, there's a possibility of returning to active duty status, or, at the very least, being cleared for civilian aviation." Daniel sat down heavily on the couch. "Why would you do this? Why reach out now?" "Honestly? Because the Air Force needs experienced rotary wing instructors, and you were one of the best we ever had. But also because watching that video reminded me why I joined the military in the first place. To work with people who have integrity, skill, and the courage to do what's right even when it's hard. You demonstrated all three today, Colonel Reed." "I have a daughter, General, a 7-year-old who needs me present, not deployed halfway around the world." "I understand. And if you were to return to active duty, we could discuss assignment options that prioritize stability, instruction positions at Fort Rucker, test pilot school, administrative roles. The Air Force has learned that retaining experienced personnel sometimes means being flexible about how we utilize them." Daniel's mind was racing. The possibility of flying again, officially, with the full resources and respect of the Air Force behind him, it was everything he'd thought he'd lost forever. But it was also dangerous. A door back to a life that had nearly consumed him. "I need time to think," he said finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll have my office send you formal information about the medical review process. No pressure, no obligation. But Colonel Reed, you should know that a lot of people saw what you did today and were reminded of why they fell in love with aviation in the first place. That matters. You matter. Don't forget that." After the call ended, Daniel sat in the quiet house, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. In the span of 24 hours, his carefully constructed life had been completely upended. The invisible janitor had become a viral sensation. The grounded pilot had been offered a path back to the sky. The man who'd chosen stability over ambition was now facing choices that could change everything. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was Marcus Webb. "Media is camped outside the facility. Ariana has security preventing anyone from approaching employees, but you should be prepared for them to track you down. Stay safe and call if you need anything." Another message from James Hendricks. "Colonel, I owe you an apology. When you were just the janitor, I laughed along with everyone else. That was wrong. I'd be honored to work with you on fixing the Valkyrie. Thank you for standing up for safety and for reminding me what real leadership looks like." And finally, a message from Ariana herself. "I've been thinking about what you said regarding dignity and respect. Tomorrow morning, I'm calling an all-hands meeting to announce changes to compensation and company culture. I'd like you there if possible, not to speak, just to stand with me. Let me know. And Daniel, thank you for believing people can change." Daniel set his phone face down on the coffee table and walked to the window. Outside, boulders spread out in the darkness, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Somewhere in that city were reporters hunting for his address, Former colleagues reading about his story, strangers forming opinions about a man they'd never met based on 90 seconds of viral video. He thought about Sarah, about what she would say if she could see him now. She'd probably laugh at the absurdity of it all. Her husband, who'd once briefed senators and flown with presidents now famous for being a janitor who could fly. But she'd also understand the fear underneath, the terror of reaching for something precious and losing it again. "What do I do, Sarah?" he whispered to the empty room. "How do I know which choice is right?" The answer came not in words, but in a memory. Sarah in the hospital during her final weeks, so weak she could barely lift her head, looking at him with those eyes that saw everything. "Promise me you'll live," she'd said. "Not just exist, not just survive. Actually live. Be brave enough to want things, to try things, to fail and try again. Show Maya what it looks like to be fully human." He'd promised, though at the time he'd had no idea how to keep that promise. In the years since, he'd interpreted it as meaning be present, be stable, be the steady anchor Maya needed. But maybe that wasn't enough. Maybe living meant being willing to fly again, to risk pain and loss and disappointment because the alternative was a half-life spent watching from the ground. Daniel pulled out his phone and typed 3 messages. To General Hawkins, "Thank you for the call. I'm interested in learning more about the medical review process. Please send the information." To Ariana, "I'll be at the morning meeting. See you then." To Marcus, "Can you get me the full engineering reports on the Valkyrie's control systems? I want to understand every documented issue before we start planning fixes." The responses came quickly. General Hawkins sent a formal email with links to medical evaluation procedures. Ariana replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji that made Daniel smile despite everything. And Marcus sent back, "Already compiled. I'll have them ready for you tomorrow. It's good to have you on the team, Colonel." Daniel looked at that last message for a long moment, then corrected gently, "Just Daniel. The rank belongs to who I was. I'm still figuring out who I am now." Marcus replied immediately, "Fair enough. But whoever you're becoming, I'm glad he's here." That night, Daniel dreamed of flying. Not the old dreams where he was back in combat, rotor wash and gunfire, and the weight of responsibility crushing him. Instead, he dreamed of teaching Maya to fly, the two of them in a small helicopter over the mountains, her hands on the controls while he guided her through the basics. In the dream, Sarah was in the back seat, smiling, proud of both of them. When he woke, his face was wet with tears, but they weren't entirely sad. Grief and hope had tangled together into something new, something he didn't have words for yet, but which felt like the beginning of healing. The morning arrived with an unusual chill, frost thick on the windows and the mountains sharp against a crystalline sky. Daniel made Maya breakfast, packed her lunch, and drove her to school while she chattered about a project on the solar system. At drop-off, several other parents watched him with recognition, but no one approached. Maybe they sensed he needed space, or maybe they just didn't know what to say to someone who'd gone from ordinary to extraordinary overnight. "Be good," Daniel told Maya as she climbed out of the truck. "Remember you've got science club after school, so I'll pick you up at 4 instead of 3. "Okay, Daddy. Are you going to fly more helicopters today?" "Maybe. Probably just talking about helicopters, though." "That's good, too. Talking is important." She shouldered her backpack and started to walk away, then turned back. "Daddy, I'm proud of you." The words hit him square in the chest. "I'm proud of you too, Butterfly, every single day." He watched her disappear into the school building, then drove to Horizon Aerotech with his heart full of a feeling he couldn't quite name. When he pulled into the parking lot, he saw exactly what Marcus had warned him about. 3 news vans with satellite equipment, reporters and camera crews clustered near the main entrance. Security guards were keeping them corralled, but they perked up when Daniel's truck appeared, recognizing it from the background of yesterday's videos. A woman in a red suit with a microphone started jogging toward him, her cameraman following. "Mr. Reed! Daniel, can we ask you a few questions about—" Daniel rolled up his window and drove past them to the employee entrance on the far side of the building where additional security had been posted. A guard he didn't recognize checked his ID, then waved him through with a respectful nod. Inside, the hallways were buzzing with energy, employees clustered in groups speaking in hushed, excited tones. The all-hands meeting wasn't scheduled for another hour, but clearly word had spread that something significant was happening. Daniel made his way to the facilities office, where Carol greeted him with a huge smile and a pastry from the fancy bakery across town. "Congratulations on your new position, though I'm a little sad I'm losing my best janitor." "You're not losing me entirely. Part-time consulting means I'll still be around, just wearing different hats." "Different uniform, too, I assume. Can't exactly meet with military procurement officers in a Navy jumpsuit." Daniel looked down at his standard facilities uniform and realized she was right. He'd need actual professional clothes. Button-down shirts, slacks, maybe even a blazer. The wardrobe of someone who sat in meetings instead of cleaned them up afterward. "I haven't thought that far ahead," he admitted. "Well, think fast. Ariana wants you on stage with her at the All Hands in 45 minutes, and you can't go looking like—" Carol gestured vaguely at his outfit. "Like this. No offense." "None taken. But Carol, I don't have anything else to wear. This is it." She studied him with the assessing eye of someone who'd raised 3 sons. "What size shirt? Large?" "Usually, yeah." "Wait here." She disappeared into her office and emerged 5 minutes later with a clean white button-down shirt still in dry cleaning plastic and a pair of dark slacks. "My sons. He left them here 6 months ago after a job interview and never came back for them. They should fit close enough." Daniel accepted the clothes gratefully and changed in the facility's bathroom, studying his reflection in the mirror afterward. The white shirt was slightly tight across the shoulders, but otherwise fit well. The slacks were maybe an inch too long, but looked professional enough. Combined with his worn leather jacket and the only pair of decent shoes he owned, he looked like someone between worlds. Not quite military, not quite civilian, not quite janitor, not quite consultant. He looked like someone in transition, which was probably accurate. The main auditorium at Horizon Aerotech could hold 500 people, and it was nearly full when Daniel arrived. Every employee from the facility had been called in. Engineers, technicians, administrative staff, security, facilities workers, cafeteria employees, even the landscaping crew. Ariana had clearly meant it when she said all hands. Marcus found him near the back. "There you are. Ariana wants you backstage before we start." "I'm not speaking, right?" She said just stand with her. "That's the plan. But Daniel, be prepared. This is going to be emotional." Ariana spent all night working on this speech, and I've never seen her so vulnerable. They made their way backstage where Ariana was pacing, reviewing notes on her tablet. She looked up when they entered, and Daniel was struck by how different she appeared from yesterday. The severe bun was gone, her hair down around her shoulders. She wore a simple black dress instead of her usual power suit. The armor was off, deliberately and completely. "Daniel, thank you for coming." She glanced at his outfit. "You look good, professional." "Carol's son's clothes, actually. I don't own much beyond uniforms and jeans." Ariana smiled. "Well, consider a clothing allowance part of your consulting package. Can't have you representing Horizon in borrowed shirts." A stage manager gave them a 5-minute warning. Ariana took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I've never been this nervous before a speech. I presented to Pentagon officials, done keynotes at international conferences, pitched to venture capitalists. But this, talking to my own employees about how badly I failed them, this terrifies me." "Then you're doing it right," Daniel said quietly. "The things worth saying are always a little terrifying." The auditorium lights dimmed, music played. The stage manager counted down, then pointed at Ariana. She walked out into the spotlight, and Daniel followed at a respectful distance, standing slightly behind and to her left. The crowd hushed immediately. 500 faces turned toward the stage with expressions ranging from curious to hopeful to skeptical. Ariana approached the microphone, and when she spoke, her voice was clear but softer than usual. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. I know you're busy, and I appreciate you taking time from your crucial work to be here." She paused, gathering herself. 2 days ago, I made a joke at an employee's expense. I humiliated someone publicly, using my position of power to get laughs at the cost of someone's dignity. Many of you were there. Most of you have seen the video, and I want to start this meeting by saying something I should have said immediately. I was wrong. What I did was cruel, unprofessional, and beneath the standards my father set when he founded this company. The auditorium was absolutely silent. Daniel could feel the collective tension. everyone holding their breath. But the truth is, that moment wasn't an aberration. It was a symptom of something deeper, a culture I've created where fear drives performance, where honesty is punished, where people are valued based on their title rather than their humanity. Ariana's voice cracked slightly. Yesterday, the man I humiliated showed me what real leadership looks like. He stood up for safety when it would have been easier to stay silent. He demonstrated competence without ego. He negotiated terms that benefit others rather than himself. And in doing so, he held up a mirror that showed me exactly how far I've strayed from my father's vision. She gestured to Daniel. Many of you know by now that Daniel Reed isn't just a janitor. He's a decorated combat pilot, a military instructor, and someone with skills that most of us can only dream of possessing. But here's what matters more. When he had those credentials, when he had the power and prestige, he used them to serve others. And when he lost them, when life forced him into a role society considers lesser, he brought the same dignity and excellence to cleaning floors that he once brought to flying helicopters. That's character. That's integrity. And it's something I've been lacking. Ariana pulled out a folder and opened it. Effective immediately, Horizon Aerotech is implementing the following changes. First, we're conducting a comprehensive review of all wages and benefits for support staff. No one who works full-time for this company should struggle to pay rent or afford health care. Second, we're establishing an anonymous feedback system where employees at any level can report concerns about safety, ethics, or management practices without fear of retaliation. Third, we're delaying the DoD demonstration by 60 days to ensure the Valkyrie X7 meets not just our performance goals but our safety standards. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Daniel saw engineers exchanging surprised looks, saw James Hendricks in the third row, sitting up straighter. I've also asked Daniel to join Horizon as a part-time consultant focusing on test program design and safety protocols. He'll be working closely with James Hendricks, who I owe a public apology to for firing him unjustly, to make sure we're building not just impressive aircraft but safe ones flown by respected, supported pilots. Ariana set down her notes and gripped the podium. My father used to say that a company's values are revealed not in its mission statement, but in how it treats people when no one is watching. For too long, I've treated people as resources to be optimized rather than as individuals deserving of respect. That changes today. Not because it's good PR, not because a video went viral, but because it's right. And if you don't believe me, if you think this is just corporate theater, I invite you to hold me accountable. Watch what I do, not what I say. And if I slip back into old patterns, call me out, loudly, publicly, because the only way we become better is by refusing to tolerate being worse. She stepped back from the podium, and for a moment nothing happened. Then someone in the middle of the auditorium started clapping. Others joined in. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet, applause thundering through the space. Daniel saw people crying, Carol in the back row, Marcus in the front, even some of the hardened engineers who probably hadn't shown emotion at work in years. Ariana's eyes found Daniel's, and he saw gratitude and terror mixed together in her expression. She just made herself vulnerable in front of her entire company, had admitted failure and promised change. Now came the hard part, actually following through. The meeting transitioned into a Q&A session where employees could ask questions or voice concerns. Daniel was struck by the thoughtfulness of the questions and by Ariana's willingness to sit with uncomfortable truths. When a cafeteria worker asked why it took a viral video for the CEO to notice wage inequality, Ariana didn't deflect or make excuses. She simply said, "Because I was willfully blind to problems that didn't directly affect me. I'm sorry, and I'm listening now." After the meeting ended, Daniel was surrounded by people wanting to shake his hand, thank him, share their own stories of being overlooked or underestimated. A young engineer told him about her father, a mechanic who'd taught her everything about aviation despite never flying himself. A security guard shared his experience as an Army helicopter crew chief. A woman from HR quietly admitted she'd been preparing to leave Horizon because of the toxic culture but was now reconsidering. Through it all, Daniel remained gracious but reserved, aware that this attention was still new and potentially dangerous. He wasn't anyone's savior, didn't want to be anyone's symbol. He was just a man trying to figure out how to move forward without losing the pieces of himself he'd worked so hard to preserve. Finally, Marcus rescued him. guiding him toward the engineering wing where a conference room had been set up with computers, whiteboards, and stacks of technical documentation about the Valkyrie X7. "Welcome to your new office," Marcus said with a smile. "Well, shared office. James will be working here too when he's not flying, and I'll probably camp out here more often than my own space. Hope you don't mind collaboration." "Collaboration is how good work gets done," Daniel said, settling into one of the chairs and pulling the nearest stack of reports toward him. "Now let's figure out how to fix this helicopter." For the next 6 hours, Daniel immersed himself in the technical details of the Valkyrie's control systems, hydraulic integration, and fly-by-wire architecture. He asked questions that made the engineers reconsider assumptions, suggested tests they hadn't thought of, drew on his military experience to identify potential failure modes that only someone who'd flown in actual combat would recognize. James Hendricks joined them around noon, initially awkward but gradually warming as Daniel treated him as an equal rather than a subordinate. They compared notes on the control lag issue, with James describing exactly what he'd felt during test flights, and Daniel translating that into technical language the engineers could work with. "You felt it in the collective primarily?" Daniel asked, studying a diagram of the hydraulic system. "Yeah, especially during transitions from hover to forward flight. There's this moment where the aircraft hesitates, like it's thinking about whether to respond. That's the pressure compensator in the hydraulic circuit. It's probably optimized for steady-state flight but struggling with rapid transitions." Daniel pointed to a specific component on the diagram. "If we adjust the spring rate here and increase the accumulator size here, it should smooth out the response without sacrificing stability." Marcus, listening from across the table, shook his head in wonder. "That's exactly what our simulations suggested, but none of us could articulate why. How did you know that instantly?" "Because I felt that exact hesitation in Blackhawks with worn hydraulic components. The sensation is the same even if the underlying architecture is different." Daniel looked up at their impressed faces and shrugged. "Book knowledge is valuable, but there's no substitute for time in the seat experiencing how things actually feel when they go wrong." They worked straight through lunch, ordering sandwiches that arrived cold because everyone forgot to eat them. The whiteboard filled with equations and diagrams. The engineering team contributed ideas that Daniel refined, building on each other's expertise in a way that felt collaborative rather than hierarchical. At 3:30, Daniel's phone alarm went off. Time to pick up Maya from science club. He stood reluctantly, aware that he'd just hit a productive flow state. "I have to get my daughter," he explained, "but I can work from home tonight if you want to send me more documentation to review." "Or," Marcus suggested carefully, "you could bring Maya here tomorrow. Show her around, let her see where her dad works. We have a pretty good STEM education program for employees' kids, and I know the team would love to meet her." Daniel hesitated, protective instincts warring with the recognition that sheltering Maya completely might do more harm than good. "Let me ask her. If she's interested, I'll bring her by." As he drove to Maya's school, Daniel reflected on how surreal the day had been. 24 hours ago, he'd been a janitor worried about losing his job. Now he was consulting on aircraft design, fielding calls from generals, and navigating a level of public attention he'd never wanted. The whiplash was disorienting, but underneath the chaos, something felt right. Using his skills again, contributing to something larger than himself, being seen as whole person rather than just a role. It fed a part of him he hadn't realized was starving. Maya burst out of science club full of excitement about a project involving circuits and LED lights. On the drive home, Daniel asked, "How would you feel about coming to my work tomorrow? Meeting some of the people I'm working with, seeing the helicopters?" Her eyes went huge. "Really? I can see the helicopters." "If you want to." Yes. Can I bring my camera? Can I take pictures? Will you let me sit in one?" Daniel laughed at her enthusiasm. "We'll see what's possible. But Butterfly, you need to understand, my work is going to be different now. I won't be home at 3 o'clock every day like I used to be. Sometimes I might need to work late or travel for a few days. We'll have to figure out care arrangements, maybe hire someone to help when I can't be there." Maya's excitement dimmed slightly. "Because you're flying again?" "Because I'm helping to build better helicopters, which means my schedule will be less predictable. But Maya, I promise, you come first, always. If you need me, I'm there. If something is important to you, I'm there. The work is important, but you're more important. Okay? She nodded, satisfied with this answer in the way only children can be satisfied, their trust absolute until given reason to doubt. Okay, Daddy, but I still get to come tomorrow, right? Absolutely. That evening, after dinner and homework and before bed routines, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with his laptop reviewing more technical documents Marcus had sent. But his mind kept drifting to bigger questions. The Air Force medical review, the consulting position, the sudden visibility, Maya's needs, his own fears and hopes tangling together into a knot he couldn't quite unravel. His phone buzzed, a text from Ariana. Thank you for today, for standing with me, for not letting me be alone in that moment. It meant more than you know. Daniel replied, You did the hard part. I just showed up. Sometimes showing up is everything. Sleep well, Daniel. Tomorrow we start actually fixing things. He looked at those words. Tomorrow we start actually fixing things, and felt something settle in his chest. Not peace exactly, but purpose. For 5 years he'd been in survival mode, protecting what remained, careful not to want too much or reach too far. But maybe survival wasn't enough anymore. Maybe it was time to actually live again, with all the risk and possibility that implied. Outside his window, the November night was clear and cold. Stars scattered across the sky like scattered hopes. Daniel thought of Sarah, of the promise he'd made to her, of Maya sleeping peacefully down the hall, of the Valkyrie X7 waiting in its hangar, of the sky that had always been his first love and greatest loss. Okay, he whispered to all of it, the past, the future, the uncertainty between them. Let's see where this goes. And for the first time in 5 years, he felt ready for whatever answer came back. The morning Maya came to Horizon Aerotech marked the beginning of something Daniel couldn't have predicted. She'd dressed herself in her favorite purple shirt and the jeans with stars on the pockets, carrying her small digital camera like a treasure. During the drive, she peppered him with questions about helicopters until Daniel's throat was dry from answering, but he loved every second of it. This bright curiosity, this fearless interest in his world. The media presence had thinned at the facility's entrance, though a few die-hard reporters still lingered hoping for another viral moment. Security waved Daniel through without incident, but Maya pressed her face against the window, watching everything with wide eyes. Is this where you work now, Daddy? Part of the time, yeah. The rest I'll work from home so I can still be around when you need me. But this is where the helicopters are? This is where the helicopters are. Marcus met them in the lobby, and Daniel watched his daughter transform from shy to confident when the old engineer knelt down to her level and said, You must be Maya. Your dad's told us you're pretty much a genius. Is that true? Maya giggled. I'm good at science, and I can do fractions now, which is really hard. Fractions are the worst, Marcus agreed solemnly. I have 3 engineering degrees, and I still don't like them. Come on, let's go see some cool stuff before your dad has to be boring and look at technical documents. They walked through corridors that hummed with morning energy, and Daniel noticed how people's reactions had shifted. Yesterday, they'd looked at him with shock and curiosity. Today, there was respect, warmth, even a few people who stopped to thank him quietly for what he'd said about dignity and visibility. It was simultaneously gratifying and uncomfortable, this new social territory he hadn't quite learned to navigate. The main hangar was bustling with activity when they arrived. The Valkyrie X7 had been moved to a maintenance bay where technicians were already implementing the hydraulic system modifications Daniel had suggested yesterday. James Hendricks stood nearby consulting with the engineering team, but when he saw Maya, his expression softened completely. Well, hello there, James said, walking over. You must be the famous Maya I've heard about. Maya looked up at her father for permission, and when Daniel nodded, she said politely, I'm not famous. My dad is famous now because he flew your helicopter. That's true. And he flew it better than I ever did, which is pretty humbling for a guy who thought he was hot stuff. James winked at her. Want to see inside the cockpit? Her entire face lit up. Really? I can? If your dad says it's okay, absolutely. Daniel found himself relaxing in ways he hadn't expected. These people weren't just tolerating Maya's presence. They were genuinely welcoming her, treating her with the same respect they'd give anyone. It reminded him of the best parts of military culture, where family was understood to be part of the mission, because you couldn't ask people to be their best selves if they were worried about neglecting the people they loved. James lifted Maya up so she could see into the Valkyrie's cockpit, explaining what each instrument did in terms simple enough for a 7-year-old but respectful enough that she didn't feel patronized. She asked questions that made the surrounding engineers smile. Why do helicopters have 2 sticks when planes only have 1? What happens if the engine stops working? Can girls be pilots too? Girls can be anything, James assured her. In fact, some of the best pilots I know are women. And your dad? He taught a lot of them. He's kind of a legend in the military aviation community. Maya looked back at Daniel with an expression he couldn't quite read. Pride mixed with something else. Maybe the ongoing recalibration of understanding who her father was beyond just the man who made her breakfast and helped with homework. Daddy never told me he was a legend, she said. That's because legends usually don't talk about themselves, James replied. They just do the work and let other people figure out the rest. Ariana appeared from the direction of the executive offices, moving with less of her usual brisk confidence and more of a tentative energy, like someone still learning new patterns. She dressed more casually today, slacks and a simple blouse instead of power suits, and when she saw Maya, she stopped and smiled. You must be Maya. I'm Ariana. I work with your dad. You're the lady from the video, Maya said with characteristic directness. The one who said you'd marry my dad if he flew the helicopter. A ripple of amused tension went through the nearby employees. Ariana's smile didn't falter, though Daniel saw the slight flush in her cheeks. That's right. I said something foolish trying to be funny, and your dad showed me that people deserve respect regardless of their job. He's a very wise man. I know, Maya said simply. He's the best dad in the world. Something in Ariana's expression cracked, vulnerability showing through the professional facade. I'm sure he is. And Maya, I want you to know that everyone here is grateful your dad is sharing his time and knowledge with us. We promise to respect his need to be there for you, okay? You come first. Maya considered this seriously, then nodded her approval. Okay, but can I visit sometimes? This place is really cool. Anytime you want. We'll even set up a special visitor badge just for you. While Maya was occupied with James and Marcus giving her a comprehensive tour of the hangar, Ariana pulled Daniel aside to a quiet corner where they could talk without being overheard. The board met last night, she said without preamble. Emergency session after yesterday's announcement. 3 members wanted to force a vote of no confidence, argued that delaying the DoD demonstration would cost us the contract and tank our stock price. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. What happened? I reminded them that my father gave me controlling interest specifically so the board couldn't override decisions about company values. Then I showed them preliminary data Marcus compiled overnight, analysis suggesting that if we'd gone forward with the demonstration without fixing the control issues, we had a 73% chance of a serious incident. Ariana's voice was steady, but Daniel could hear the strain underneath. I told them I'd rather lose a contract than risk someone's life, and if they couldn't support that priority, they were welcome to resign. Did they? 2 did. The 3rd abstained from the vote, but stayed on. The rest of the board, to their credit, actually seemed relieved someone finally said it out loud, that safety matters more than timelines. She looked at him directly. But Daniel, I want you to understand the stakes. If the Valkyrie demonstration fails after this delay, if the DoD goes with another contractor, Horizon will take a significant financial hit. Jobs will be lost. My leadership will be questioned by shareholders. I'm betting everything that doing this right matters more than doing it fast. It does matter more, Daniel said firmly. And the demonstration won't fail. We're going to fix the actual problems, test thoroughly, and show the DoD an aircraft they can trust. That's more valuable than showing them something impressive that might kill their pilots 6 months into deployment. You sound very certain. I am certain, not because I'm arrogant, but because I've seen what happens when people prioritize performance over safety. I've attended memorial services for pilots who died in aircraft that looked good on paper but had issues everyone was too afraid to acknowledge. I've written letters to families explaining that their loved one's death served a purpose, knowing that no purpose justifies preventable tragedy. His voice caught slightly. I won't be part of that again. If you're asking me to help build something that puts pilots at risk to meet a deadline, I'll walk away right now. Ariana was quiet for a long moment, watching Maya across the hangar as she laughed at something Marcus was showing her. She looks like you, Same eyes, same way of tilting her head when she's thinking. She has her mother's spirit, though. Sarah was fearless about learning new things, diving into subjects just because they interested her. Maya's the same way. Last month, she decided she wanted to understand how the internet works, so I spent 2 weeks explaining networks and protocols and data packets to a second grader. Did she understand it? Enough to build a basic web page about her favorite book series. 7 years old, and she's already coding. Daniel smiled, the pride evident in his voice. I'm raising someone remarkable, Ms. Locke, and I need to make sure the world I'm helping build is worthy of her. Then let's build something worthy, Ariana said. And Daniel? Call me Ariana. The formality feels wrong after everything. Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel fell into a rhythm that felt both foreign and familiar. Mornings were for Maya, breakfast, school drop-off, sometimes helping in her classroom when they needed parent volunteers. Then he'd head to Horizon, where he'd spend 4 to 6 hours working with the engineering team and James on Valkyrie modifications. Late afternoons were pickup, homework help, dinner, bedtime routines. Evenings, after Maya slept, he'd review technical documents and respond to emails, often working until midnight. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. The hydraulic system modifications they'd designed tested beautifully in simulation, eliminating 90% of the control lag James had experienced. They discovered 2 other issues during the review process: a resonance frequency in the tail rotor assembly that could cause vibration at certain speeds, and a subtle asymmetry in the main rotor blade weights that would have become problematic during aggressive maneuvers. Problems that might not have been caught until someone died. This is what good engineering looks like, Marcus said one afternoon as they reviewed test data. Not rushing to be first, but being thorough enough to be right. James had transformed from the exhausted, defensive pilot Daniel had first seen into something closer to a partner. They'd fly test sequences together, with James in the cockpit reporting exactly what he felt, and Daniel on the ground interpreting those sensations through the lens of someone who'd experienced thousands of flight hours in dozens of aircraft. The collaboration produced insights neither could have achieved alone. You should be flying this yourself, James said, after one particularly successful test. You're better than me, Colonel. Everyone knows it. I'm better than you at some things because I'm older and have more experience, Daniel corrected. You're better than me at other things, like adapting to new aircraft faster than anyone I've ever seen. And James? I can't fly professionally anymore. The medical retirement is real, even if one flight made it look otherwise. My back injury causes chronic pain that would be dangerous at altitude, and sometimes my left leg just stops responding to signals from my brain. I can compensate for short demonstrations, but sustained flight operations? I'd be a liability. But you could get reevaluated. I heard you talking to someone about that. Daniel had indeed begun the medical review process with the Air Force, driven by a combination of curiosity and hope he didn't want to examine too closely. The initial paperwork was daunting: medical records, detailed history of symptoms, statements from current physicians. He'd completed it all with Maya doing homework beside him at the kitchen table, occasionally asking what he was writing. I could, Daniel acknowledged, but even if I'm cleared medically, I'm not sure I want to go back to active duty. That life consumed me once, James. It made me good at my job, but not always good at being present for the people I loved. Sarah understood, but Maya never knew that version of me, and I'm not sure I want her to. What if you could do both? Be the pilot and the dad? Then I'd be doing both badly, Daniel said, with certainty that came from experience. Some people can balance it. I never could. When I was flying, I was all in on flying. When I'm with Maya, I'm all in on being her dad. Maybe that makes me inflexible, but it's honest about my limitations. The conversation stayed with him, though, tumbling through his mind during quiet moments. The truth was that flying the Valkyrie again had awakened something he'd thought was dead. Not the ambition or the need for validation, but the simple, pure joy of being in the sky. That feeling of freedom, of three-dimensional movement, of working with a machine that responded to the slightest input, nothing else compared. And knowing it was still there, still possible, made choosing to stay grounded both harder and more meaningful. 3 weeks after the viral video, Daniel received a formal letter from the Air Force Medical Evaluation Board at Wright-Patterson. They'd reviewed his file and wanted him to come to Ohio for a comprehensive evaluation. 3 days of testing, including physical exams, neurological assessments, flight simulator trials, and psychological evaluations. It would mean leaving Maya, arranging care, stepping back into the military world he'd left behind. He was sitting at his kitchen table staring at the letter when Maya came in for breakfast, still wearing her Constellation pajamas. "What's that?" she asked, pouring cereal with the careful concentration of someone who'd only recently been trusted with the milk jug. "A letter from the Air Force. They want me to come take some tests to see if I could fly again officially." Maya stopped mid-pour. "Would you go back to the Army?" "Air Force butterfly." "And I don't know. That's what the tests would help figure out." "Would you have to leave me?" The fear in her voice was a knife to his heart. "No, baby, never. Even if I could fly again, even if they offered me a job, I would only take it if it meant staying near you. I promise." She finished pouring her cereal and sat down across from him. "Mrs. Henderson says sometimes grown-ups have to do hard things for work. She says that's okay as long as they come back." Mrs. Henderson is right. "But Maya, I want you to understand something." Daniel set down the letter and gave her his full attention. "Nothing, and I mean nothing, is more important to me than being your dad. Not flying, not jobs, not anything. If going to Ohio for these tests would upset you or make you feel abandoned, I won't go. Your feelings matter more than anything else." Maya thought about this while eating several spoonfuls of cereal. Finally, she said, "I think you should go, because you miss flying, and maybe they can help you fly again without your back hurting. And Daddy, I'm not a baby. I can stay with someone for a few days." The maturity in her words reminded Daniel painfully of Sarah, who'd always been able to see past immediate discomfort to larger truths. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just notice it more now." She grinned at him, milk on her upper lip. "But you have to promise to call me every night and tell me about the tests." "I promise." That afternoon, Daniel called Wright-Patterson and scheduled the evaluation for 3 weeks out. Then he called Carol, who immediately volunteered to take Maya for the duration, waving away his concerns about imposing. "Daniel, I raised 3 boys while working full-time. One well-behaved 7-year-old girl is basically a vacation. Besides, my youngest is only 2 years older than Maya. They can have a sleepover and I'll make sure she gets to school on time and eats vegetables. It's handled. I'll pay you." "You absolutely will not. This is what community does." "You do the same for me." The assumption that he was part of a community, that people would show up for him the way he'd show up for them, was still novel enough to make Daniel's throat tight. For so long it had been just him and Maya against the world, a closed system of 2 people taking care of each other. Letting others in felt vulnerable and necessary all at once. At Horizon, the Valkyrie modifications were complete and ready for comprehensive flight testing. James had already run low-speed trials and reported that the control lag was essentially eliminated. The helicopter responded crisply now, the hesitation gone. But the real test would be pushing it to full operational specifications, the kind of aggressive maneuvers that the DoD demonstration would require. "I want you in the observer seat," James said as they prepped for the high-speed test. "If something goes wrong, you'll know what it is before I do." The observer seat is for engineers, not grounded pilots. "You're both. Come on, Colonel. I trust you more than anyone else here to keep me alive if this goes sideways." Daniel looked at the Valkyrie, gleaming in the afternoon sun, and felt the pull so strongly it was almost physical. He thought about his back, about the nerve damage that could flare without warning. He thought about Maya, who needed him whole. He thought about Sarah, who'd always encouraged him to be brave, even when being brave meant acknowledging limitations. "All right," he said finally, "but we follow a conservative test profile. No heroics, no pushing limits we haven't analyzed. We're proving the modifications work, not trying to set records." Agreed. They suited up in flight gear and conducted a thorough pre-flight inspection. Marcus and the engineering team had set up telemetry equipment that would capture every data point during the flight, monitoring stress loads, vibration, control surface movement, engine parameters. This wasn't just a test flight. It was a comprehensive examination of everything they'd changed. The cockpit felt like home and foreign territory simultaneously. Daniel strapped into the observer seat behind James, familiar with the layout, but aware this wasn't his aircraft to command. The instruments hummed to life as James ran through startup procedures. Each switch, flip, engage, check a small ceremony of preparation. Tower, this is Valkyrie X7 ready for departure. James's voice came through the intercom, professional and calm. Valkyrie X7, you're cleared for the test envelope. Good hunting. The helicopter lifted smoothly, James's touch confident as they transitioned from hover to forward flight. Daniel watched the instruments carefully, noting that the collective response was immediate now, none of the hesitation that had plagued earlier flights. They climbed to 5,000 feet and began the test sequence. Forward flight at increasing speeds, turns at various bank angles, climbs and descents at different rates. How's it feel? Daniel asked through the intercom. Like a completely different machine. Responsive, predictable, no weird lag or vibration. It's honestly beautiful. They pushed into higher speed regimes, the Valkyrie accelerating smoothly past 80 knots, 90, 100. The airframe remained stable, the controls crisp. Daniel monitored his own body carefully, feeling for the warning signs that his back was about to betray him, the tingling in his leg, the sharp spike of pain in his lower spine. So far, nothing beyond the normal discomfort of sustained sitting. Initiating aggressive turn, James announced, banking the helicopter hard left. The G-forces pushed Daniel into his seat as they carved through the sky, but the Valkyrie tracked perfectly, no wobble or oscillation. Holy hell, this thing handles like a dream now. They ran through the full test matrix, auto-rotation practice, maximum power climbs, simulated engine failures, every scenario the DoD would want to see. The helicopter performed flawlessly, each modification proving its worth. On the ground, Daniel could hear Marcus's excited voice over the radio calling out data points, confirming that the telemetry matched what they were experiencing in the cockpit. After 90 minutes aloft, they returned to Horizon and set up for landing. James brought them down with the kind of soft touch that marked truly skilled pilots, the skids kissing the tarmac so gently that the impact was barely noticeable. "Ladies and gentlemen," James said as he wound down the engine, "we have ourselves a working helicopter." The engineering team erupted in cheers when they climbed out. Marcus ran over with a tablet full of data, his face flushed with excitement. Everything looked perfect from here. Vibration levels were nominal throughout the entire envelope. Control authority was consistent. Stress loads were well within design limits. "Daniel, this is exactly what we needed." Ariana appeared from the observation building, walking quickly across the tarmac. "I watched the whole thing. James, that was incredible flying. Daniel, your modifications worked perfectly. We're ready for the DoD demonstration." "Not quite," Daniel cautioned, always the instructor. "We need at least 5 more test flights across different conditions, temperature extremes, higher altitude, simulated combat maneuvers. One good flight proves we fixed the obvious problems. Multiple flights prove we built something reliable." "So we do more flights. How long?" 2 weeks of intensive testing if we're lucky, 3 if we find any new issues that need addressing. Ariana nodded, accepting his expertise without argument. "Then that's what we'll do. I'll notify the DoD that we're on track for the demonstration date. Marcus, coordinate with James on the test schedule. Daniel, can I speak with you privately?" They walked to a quiet corner of the hangar, away from the celebration. Ariana seemed nervous, which was unusual enough to put Daniel on alert. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing's wrong. Actually, everything's right, which is the problem." She laughed at his confused expression. "Sorry, that didn't make sense. What I mean is, you've transformed this company in 3 weeks, Daniel. Not just the engineering work, though that's been incredible, but the culture, the way people talk to each other, the willingness to admit problems instead of hiding them. You did that just by being yourself." "I didn't do anything special. I just treated people with respect." "Which was exactly what we needed. And now I'm terrified of losing you." Ariana looked out at the Valkyrie, her company's future sitting on the tarmac. "You're going to Ohio for the medical evaluation. If the Air Force clears you, if they offer you a position back on active duty, what are you going to choose?" Daniel had been asking himself the same question for weeks. "I honestly don't know. Part of me wants to fly again so badly, it's like a physical hunger. But part of me knows that the life I have now, being present for Maya, having stability, that's valuable too. Maybe more valuable." "What if you didn't have to choose?" Ariana said carefully. What if Horizon could offer you something that let you fly and be the dad you want to be? I'm listening. The DoD contract, if we win it, includes a 10-year support and training agreement. The military will need experienced pilots to help integrate the Valkyrie into their operations, to train their crews, to troubleshoot issues in the field. That role requires someone with your exact background, combat experience, instructor credentials, and credibility with military culture. It's part-time, mostly stateside, and pays extremely well. Daniel felt hope and caution warring in his chest. You're offering me a job that doesn't exist yet, contingent on winning a contract we haven't demonstrated for. I'm offering you a reason to stay. With us, with Maya, with this community that's formed around you. Because Daniel, whether or not you realize it, people here don't just respect you. They care about you. Carol, Marcus, James, even me in my own awkward way. You're not alone anymore, and I don't want you to go back to feeling like you have to be. The words landed with unexpected weight. Daniel had spent 5 years believing that isolation was strength, that depending only on himself protected both him and Maya from further loss. But these past weeks had shown him something different, that community could be strength too, that allowing people to care about you wasn't weakness but courage. I can't promise anything until after the evaluation, he said finally. But Ariana, thank you for seeing me, for believing in me, for giving me a place where I can be useful. That matters more than you know. You don't have to thank me for recognizing the obvious. She smiled. Now go home to your daughter. Tell her about the test flight. Make her dinner. Be the dad she deserves. The helicopters will still be here tomorrow. That evening, Daniel picked Maya up from science club and took her to their favorite diner, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and menus that hadn't changed in 30 years. Over burgers and milkshakes, he told her about the test flight in terms she could understand, how the helicopter had responded better, how the modifications they'd made worked exactly as planned, how good it felt to be in the sky again, even just as an observer. Did your back hurt? Maya asked, ever practical about her father's limitations. A little, but manageable. The doctors in Ohio will help figure out what's possible and what isn't. And then you'll decide about flying again? Then I'll decide with you. Because Maya, any decision I make about my future is our decision. You get a vote too. She nodded seriously, as if understanding the weight of what he was offering. Can we get dessert? Daniel laughed, grateful for the reminder that she was still 7 years old despite her occasional wisdom. Absolutely. What do you want? Chocolate cake. The really big piece. They shared the cake, Maya getting more frosting on her face than in her mouth, and Daniel felt a peace settle over him that had nothing to do with helicopters or careers or viral videos. This, sitting in a worn booth with his daughter, listening to her chatter about her science project, wiping chocolate from her chin, this was the center of his life. Everything else orbited around it. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of test flights and data analysis. James pushed the Valkyrie through every scenario they could imagine, and the helicopter performed beautifully. A few minor issues emerged, a trim adjustment needed for high-speed flight, some vibration in a specific RPM range that required balancing the rotors more precisely, but nothing that suggested fundamental flaws. They were building something remarkable, and everyone could feel it. The night before Daniel was scheduled to leave for Ohio, Ariana hosted a dinner at her home for the core team. Her house was stunning, modern architecture perched in the foothills with views of the mountains and the city spreading out below like scattered jewels. But she'd made it warm somehow, personal touches that spoke to the woman underneath the CEO persona. Photos of her father throughout the house. His presence still felt years after his death. Marcus, James, Daniel, and several senior engineers gathered around a table laden with food Ariana had admitted she'd ordered in because cooking wasn't her strength. The conversation flowed easily, technical talk mixing with personal stories, laughter erupting at shared jokes. Daniel watched these people who'd become something like friends and marveled at how quickly life could change. "A toast," Ariana said, standing with her wine glass raised. 3 weeks ago, I made a terrible joke at the expense of someone I'd underestimated. Today, that man has helped us build an aircraft I'm genuinely proud of, and more importantly, He's helped us become a company worthy of my father's vision. To Daniel, for showing us that expertise and humility aren't contradictions and that real leadership is measured in how you lift others up, not how you tear them down. To Daniel, everyone echoed, glasses clinking. Speech, someone called out. Daniel stood reluctantly, uncomfortable with attention, but recognizing the moment required words. I'm not good at speeches. The military taught me to brief missions, not inspire people. But I'll say this. 3 weeks ago, I was invisible. Not because of any conspiracy or cruelty, but because I'd chosen to be. After losing Sarah after leaving the Air Force, I decided the safest thing was to disappear into a simple life where expectations were low and disappointment was impossible. You all changed that. Not by forcing me into visibility, but by showing me that being seen can be a gift instead of a burden. So thank you. For the work, for the friendship, and for reminding me that hiding from life isn't the same as living it. The table erupted in applause. Marcus was crying again, unashamed of his emotions. James raised his glass in a private salute that carried the weight of pilot-to-pilot respect. And Ariana smiled with something that looked like hope. Later, as people were leaving, Ariana caught Daniel alone on the deck overlooking the city. Whatever happens in Ohio, whatever you decide about your future, I want you to know that you have a home here. Not just a job, but a place where people care about you and Maya. Don't forget that. I won't, Daniel promised. And Ariana, you've changed too. The person hosting this dinner, bringing people together, celebrating the team, that's not the same CEO who mocked a janitor 3 weeks ago. No, she agreed softly. She's not. And I'm grateful every day that you gave me the chance to become someone better. The next morning, Daniel kissed Maya goodbye at Carol's house, holding her tight and promising to call every night. She was brave about it, only crying a little, and Carol shooed him away with assurances that everything would be fine. The flight to Ohio was unremarkable, time spent reviewing medical documents and trying not to think too hard about what the evaluations might reveal. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base was enormous, a small city dedicated to military aviation research and development. When Daniel checked in at the medical center, he was greeted by a young airman who looked at his file and said with obvious respect, "Lieutenant Colonel Reed, it's an honor, sir. My instructor at Fort Rucker trained under you. He says you're a legend." "I'm just a guy who flew helicopters," Daniel said, but the words felt automatic now, a deflection he wasn't sure he believed anymore. The evaluations were grueling, physical examinations that tested his range of motion, his pain levels, his neurological responses. Hours in MRI machines mapping the exact nature of his spinal injury. Cognitive tests measuring reaction time and decision-making under stress. Flight simulator trials where they could monitor his physiological responses to the demands of piloting while simultaneously assessing his skills. On the second day, during a particularly challenging simulator scenario involving multiple system failures in a combat environment, Daniel's left leg went completely numb. He compensated automatically, using his right foot on both pedals and adjusting his technique, but the supervising physician noticed immediately. "Colonel, are you experiencing symptoms?" Left leg loss of sensation. It happens sometimes. They stopped the simulation and ran more tests. The senior neurologist, a colonel named Patterson with gray hair and kind eyes, explained what they were seeing. The shrapnel damaged nerve pathways in your lower spine. Some healing has occurred, more than we typically see, but the damage is permanent. Under normal circumstances, your compensation strategies are excellent. But sustained flight operations, especially combat scenarios where unpredictable demands occur, pose significant risk. If that leg fails at the wrong moment during a critical maneuver, the results could be catastrophic. "So I can't fly," Daniel said, feeling the door close even though part of him had always known it would. "Not in a military capacity requiring full operational readiness, no. However," Patterson pulled up imaging on his computer screen. "The healing that has occurred is remarkable. With continued physical therapy and possibly some surgical interventions to remove scar tissue, you could potentially be cleared for civilian aviation. Less demanding scenarios, predictable conditions, aircraft with modern safety systems that can compensate for momentary incapacitation. But not combat, not instruction, not the things I was actually good at." "No," Patterson said gently. "I'm sorry, Colonel. I know that's not the answer you wanted." The third day's evaluations felt like going through motions after that conversation. The psychological assessment revealed what Daniel already knew. He carried trauma from his combat experiences and grief from losing Sarah, but both were well managed. He wasn't a danger to himself or others. He was just a man learning to live with loss, which the therapist pointed out was the human condition. On the final evening in Ohio, Daniel sat in his hotel room and called Maya as promised. "How are the tests going, Daddy?" Her voice came through bright and clear, the sound of home. "They're done. I fly back tomorrow." "Did you pass?" "It's not really about passing or failing, Butterfly. It's about understanding what my body can do and what it can't. And the doctors told me I can't fly military helicopters anymore. My back injury won't let me." "So you're not going back to the Air Force?" "No, baby. I'm staying home with you." There was a pause, and then Maya said something that broke his heart and healed it simultaneously. "I'm sad for you because I know you love flying. But Daddy, I'm happy for me because I love having you home." "I love being home," Daniel said, and realized he meant it completely. "I love being your dad more than I ever loved flying. That's the truth." "Will you still work with the helicopters at Horizon?" "Yeah, I'll still work with them, just on the ground instead of in the air." "That's good, because you make them better, even from the ground." After they hung up, Daniel sat staring out the hotel window at the Ohio darkness. He'd come here hoping for something, permission to return to his old life, validation that he could still be the pilot he'd once been. Instead, he'd received clarity. The door to that past was closed, not just by injury, but by the recognition that reopening it would mean leaving behind something more important. He texted Ariana, "Medical evaluation complete, not cleared for military aviation. We'll discuss everything when I get back." Her response came immediately. "I'm sorry that door closed, but Daniel, other doors are open. Come home. We'll figure out what's next together." Home. When had Boulder become home again instead of just the place he existed? When had these people, Ariana, Marcus, James, Carol, become his people instead of just colleagues? When had allowing himself to be seen transformed from terrifying vulnerability to unexpected strength? The flight back to Colorado the next day felt like returning instead of just traveling. When he picked Maya up from Carol's house, she ran into his arms with such force she nearly knocked him over. "I missed you so much, Daddy." "I missed you too, Butterfly. More than the sky, more than anything." That night, after they'd eaten dinner, and she'd told him everything about her 3 days with Carol's family, Daniel tucked Maya into bed and sang the lullaby Sarah had always sung. Before he could leave, Maya caught his hand. "Daddy, are you sad about not flying?" He thought about lying, about protecting her from adult disappointments, but Maya deserved truth even when truth was complicated. "I'm sad about what I lost," he said slowly. "The Air Force was a big part of my life, and flying was something I was really good at. But Maya, I'm learning that losing one thing doesn't mean losing everything. I still get to work with helicopters. I still get to use what I know to help people. And most importantly, I get to be here with you every day. That's not a consolation prize, baby. That's the actual prize." "Good," she said, satisfied, "because you're my prize too." The next morning, Daniel returned to Horizon feeling both lighter and more grounded than he had in weeks. The team welcomed him back with genuine warmth, and when he told them about the medical evaluation results, their sympathy was real, but not pitying. "So what you're saying," James said slowly, "is that we still get to work together. You're just officially banned from showing me up in my own cockpit?" "That's one way to interpret it," Daniel agreed with a smile. "I can live with that." The DoD demonstration was scheduled for 10 days out, and those days passed in a frenzy of final preparations. They ran 2 more complete test sequences, confirming that the Valkyrie was ready. Daniel helped James prepare for the demonstration flight, briefing scenarios and contingencies, drawing on his experience with military evaluations to anticipate what the procurement officers would want to see. The night before the demonstration, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay in bed thinking about everything that had changed since that morning Ariana had pointed at him and laughed. The viral humiliation that had exposed him, the flight that had revealed him, the weeks that had transformed him from invisible to essential. All of it had been terrifying and necessary, breaking him open in ways that made space for something new to grow. His phone buzzed. A text from Ariana. Can't sleep either. Nervous about tomorrow. Want to talk? He called her, and they spoke for an hour about nothing and everything. The demonstration, their fears, their hopes, the strange journey they'd both been on. At one point, Ariana said, I know I joked about marrying you if you flew the helicopter. Obviously, that was inappropriate, and I apologize again for it. But Daniel, if I were going to marry anyone, it would be someone like you. Someone who knows the difference between power and strength, between authority and leadership. You've made me want to be better. And that's a rare gift. You've made me want to be whole again, Daniel replied. Not the person I was before everything fell apart, but someone who can hold all the broken pieces and still function. That's its own kind of gift. Friends? Ariana asked. Friends, Daniel confirmed. Good ones, I hope. The day of the DoD demonstration dawned clear and cold, the kind of November morning where the sky was so blue it hurt to look at. The procurement team arrived promptly. 3 colonels, 2 generals, and a contingent of technical experts who would scrutinize every aspect of the Valkyrie's performance. They gathered in Horizon's observation building while James completed his pre-flight inspection, professional and thorough. Daniel stood with Ariana, Marcus, and the engineering team, all of them tense with anticipation. They'd done everything possible to prepare. Now came the moment of truth. James climbed into the Valkyrie and began the startup sequence. The turbine whine built into a roar, the rotor blades began to turn, and the helicopter lifted smoothly into the perfect Colorado sky. For the next 90 minutes, James put on a masterclass of precision flying, aggressive turns, maximum power climbs, simulated emergency procedures, landing on a moving target, everything the military had requested and more. The Valkyrie performed flawlessly. When James landed and shut down, the procurement team spent 30 minutes examining the aircraft and reviewing telemetry data. Then the senior general, a woman named Richardson, with sharp eyes and an even sharper reputation, approached Ariana. Ms. Locke, that was one of the most impressive flight demonstrations I've seen in 30 years of military aviation. Your helicopter exceeds our requirements in every measurable category. Subject to final contract negotiations, I'm prepared to recommend approval for full procurement. Ariana's professional facade cracked just slightly, relief and joy breaking through. Thank you, General. That means everything. I do have one question, though. General Richardson looked around the group until her eyes landed on Daniel. Lieutenant Colonel Reed, the pilot who went viral. I'm told you were instrumental in identifying and fixing critical safety issues during development. I helped, ma'am, but this was a team effort. Don't be modest, Colonel. I've read your file. Multiple distinguished flying crosses, a silver star, commendations from everyone you've ever worked with. You're exactly the kind of experienced operator the Air Force needs for our rotary wing programs. Have you considered returning to service? Daniel felt everyone's eyes on him, the question hanging in the air like a challenge. This was a different kind of test, not of skill, but of knowing what mattered. I have considered it, ma'am, but my answer is no. I have a 7-year-old daughter who needs her father present, and I've learned that being present is more important than being impressive. I'm honored to support the military in a consulting capacity through Horizon, but my active duty days are behind me. General Richardson studied him for a long moment, then nodded with what looked like understanding. The Air Force's loss is your daughter's gain, and Colonel, speaking as someone who missed too many of my own children's childhoods chasing promotions, you're making the right choice. After the procurement team left, after the contracts were signed and the celebration began, Daniel slipped away to the hangar's exterior where he could breathe. The mountains rose in the distance, snow-capped and eternal. Somewhere in those foothills was his daughter, learning about fractions and dreaming about the stars. Ariana found him there, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. We did it. $800 million contract, 10-year support agreement, and a production order that will secure jobs for everyone at Horizon for the foreseeable future. You did it, Daniel corrected. You had the courage to delay, to prioritize safety, to build something worthy instead of just something impressive. We did it together, Ariana insisted. And Daniel? That support and training role I mentioned? It's yours if you want it. Good pay, flexible hours, meaningful work. But no pressure. I just want you to know you have options. Daniel thought about it. about what it would mean to stay connected to aviation in a way that honored both his skills and his priorities. What does the schedule look like? How often would I need to travel? Maybe 1 week a month once production starts, mostly stateside. The rest you could work from here or from home. We'd structure it around Maya's school schedule, her needs first. Then, yes, Daniel said, I'd like that. Not because I need to feel important, but because I want to keep contributing to something that matters. They stood together watching the sun begin its descent toward the mountains. Two people who'd been broken in different ways and found unexpected wholeness in the rebuilding. Thank you, Ariana said quietly, for everything. For showing up even when I didn't deserve your presence. For believing people can change. For reminding us all what dignity looks like. Thank you for seeing me, Daniel replied, even when I was trying very hard to stay invisible. That evening, Daniel picked Maya up from school and took her to the park, even though it was cold. They sat on the swings together, rocking gently, watching other families play as the light faded. The helicopter demonstration went well today, he told her. The military is buying our aircraft, which means job security and good work for a long time. That's good, Daddy. Does it mean you're famous still? Probably less famous now. The internet moves on quickly. Good. I liked it better when you were just my dad instead of everyone's helicopter guy. Daniel laughed. Me too, Butterfly. Me too. Can we have pancakes for dinner? Again? We just had them 3 days ago. But you said pancakes are my superpower. I need to maintain my strength. That logic is airtight. Pancakes it is. They swung higher, feet kicking toward a sky that was turning purple and gold with sunset. And in that moment, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Complete. Not because he'd reclaimed his old life or achieved some new triumph, but because he'd learned to measure success in moments like this. Simple, present, real. The sky was beautiful. But the ground was where he belonged, where his daughter needed him, where the life he was building waited with all its ordinary, extraordinary possibility. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The weeks following the DoD demonstration settled into something Daniel had almost forgotten existed, a rhythm that felt sustainable instead of just survivable. Winter arrived properly in Colorado, snow blanketing the mountains and turning Boulder into something from a postcard. Maya started rehearsals for the school's winter concert, where she'd been chosen to play a speaking role, and Daniel blocked out those performance dates in his calendar with the same priority he'd once given to combat briefings. At Horizon, the contract win had transformed the company's energy. Where there had been desperation and fear, now there was purpose and pride. Production planning for the Valkyrie began in earnest, which meant Daniel's consulting role shifted from fixing immediate problems to building sustainable systems. He helped design training protocols for military pilots who'd eventually fly the aircraft, drafted technical documentation that translated engineering specifications into operator-friendly language, and served as the bridge between Horizon's civilian culture and the military's operational requirements. It was meaningful work that used his expertise without consuming his life, and he was grateful for it. One morning in early December, Daniel arrived at Horizon to find Carol waiting by his office with an envelope and an expression he couldn't quite read. "This came for you," she said, handing it over. "Delivered by courier, marked personal and confidential." The return address was the Air Force Personnel Center. Daniel's stomach tightened as he opened it, scanning the official letterhead and formal language. It was a final determination from the Medical Evaluation Board, more detailed than the verbal assessment he'd received in Ohio. The letter confirmed what he already knew: permanent medical retirement status, not cleared for military aviation operations requiring full physical readiness. But it also included something unexpected: a commendation from General Hawkins acknowledging his years of service, his contributions to military aviation, and a paragraph that made his throat tight. Lieutenant Colonel Reed's decision to prioritize family over career, to choose presence over prestige, exemplifies the values we claim to honor but don't always support. His service to this nation was distinguished. His choice to serve his daughter with equal dedication is no less honorable. The Air Force salutes both. Daniel read it 3 times, each pass revealing new layers. It wasn't just a medical determination. It was validation that the choice he'd made was respected, that walking away from flying didn't diminish what he'd accomplished when he could fly. Good news or bad news? Carol asked gently. Both, neither, just closure, I think. He folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. The Air Force officially can't use me anymore, but they're saying that's okay, that I'm okay. Of course you're okay, better than okay, but I imagine it still hurts to have that door closed completely. Yeah, Daniel admitted. But you know what? Closed doors mean you stop wasting energy trying to push them open. You can finally turn around and see what other doors are available. Marcus appeared in the hallway, slightly out of breath. Daniel, good. You're here. We've got a situation that needs your expertise. They walked quickly to the engineering wing, where a cluster of people had gathered around a computer displaying telemetry data. James stood at the center, his expression troubled. What's wrong? Daniel asked. We've been running extended duration tests on the production prototypes, James explained. Everything's been perfect until this morning. Test Unit 3 developed a vibration at hour 47 of a 50-hour endurance trial. Slight, but measurable. Could be nothing. Could be the start of something serious. Daniel studied the data, his trained eye picking out the pattern immediately. It's in a specific frequency range that corresponds to main rotor RPM. You're seeing harmonic resonance building in the transmission system. The modifications we made fixed the immediate control issues, but we didn't account for how sustained operation at cruise power settings would affect the drivetrain over time. Is it dangerous? Ariana had arrived, her CEO instincts immediately focused on risk. Not immediately, but left unchecked over hundreds of flight hours, it could lead to transmission failure, which in a helicopter means catastrophic failure. Daniel turned to the engineering team. We need to add a damping system to the transmission mount. It'll add maybe 10 pounds to the aircraft weight, but it'll prevent this resonance from developing in the first place. Will this delay production? Ariana asked, and Daniel could hear the fear underneath, fear that they'd miss delivery schedules, disappoint the military, lose the contract they'd worked so hard to win. It'll delay initial deliveries by maybe 3 weeks, Marcus said, already doing calculations. But Daniel's right. Better to catch this now than have it show up after aircraft are in service. Then we delay, Ariana said without hesitation. I'll notify the DoD personally, explain the issue and our solution. They'll understand. The military values reliability over speed. Daniel watched her make that decision, watched her choose the harder right over the easier wrong, and felt proud of how far she'd come from the woman who'd mocked a janitor to get laughs. Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel worked closely with the engineering team to design and test the transmission damping system. It was detailed, technical work that required patience and precision, exactly the kind of problem-solving he'd always excelled at. The solution they developed was elegant, adding minimal weight while completely eliminating the harmonic resonance issue. During those same weeks, Maya's excitement about the winter concert built to fever pitch. She practiced her lines constantly, reciting them at breakfast, in the car, before bed. Daniel helped her memorize them, playing the other characters' parts with exaggerated voices that made her giggle even as she corrected his delivery. Daddy, you have to sound more like a snowman, not like a robot. I thought snowmen were basically frozen robots. That's not how it works. But she was laughing, and that was the whole point. The evening of the concert arrived clear and cold. The school auditorium packed with parents and grandparents and siblings all armed with cameras. Daniel sat in the third row, having arrived 45 minutes early to secure a good seat. Carol sat beside him. She'd asked if she could come, saying she'd gotten attached to Maya during those 3 days of caretaking and wanted to see her perform. When Maya walked onto the stage in her costume, Daniel's heart swelled so large it felt like it might crack his ribs. She delivered her lines perfectly, her voice clear and confident, and when she finished her big scene, Daniel clapped so hard his hands hurt. After the concert, Maya ran to him still in costume, her face flushed with triumph. Did you see me? Did I do good? You were perfect, absolutely perfect. He lifted her up even though she was getting too big for it, spinning her around while she shrieked with delight. Mr. Reed? A woman approached tentatively. I'm Amy Chen, Maya's teacher. I just wanted to say, Maya talks about you constantly. How you help with her homework, read to her every night, never miss school events. In 10 years of teaching, I've rarely seen a parent so consistently present. Your daughter is lucky to have you." The compliment landed in a place Daniel hadn't known needed validation. "Thank you, I'm the lucky one, though. She makes it easy." As they walked to the truck, Maya chattering about the performance and clutching the flowers Daniel had bought her, he felt the pieces of his life fitting together in ways that finally made sense. The career that had ended, the loss he'd survived, the humiliation that had exposed him, the opportunities that had emerged, all of it had led to this moment, this feeling of being exactly where he was supposed to be. The week before Christmas, Horizon held a company holiday party at a venue downtown. Daniel almost didn't go. Social events with coworkers still felt slightly awkward, but Ariana had specifically asked him to attend, saying it was important. So he put on the one sport coat he owned, arranged for Carol to watch Maya for the evening, and drove to the party trying to manage his anxiety about crowds and small talk. The venue was beautiful, decorated with lights and greenery, a live band playing in one corner. Daniel arrived to find the place already full, Horizon employees mingling with their families, laughter and conversation creating a warm buzz of community. He spotted Marcus near the bar and was heading in that direction when Ariana intercepted him. "Daniel, perfect timing. Come with me. There's something I want to show you." She led him to a quieter corner where a large framed photograph hung on the wall, the Valkyrie X7 in flight, backlit by a golden sunset, looking like something from a dream. Beneath it, a bronze plaque read, "In recognition of Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Reed, whose expertise, integrity, and leadership transformed not just our aircraft, but our company, with gratitude from everyone at Horizon Aerotech." Daniel stared at it, not sure what to feel. "Ariana, this is too much." "It's not enough," she corrected, "but it's a start." "Daniel, you changed us. Not just the engineering, though that was crucial, but you showed us what it means to lead with humility, to prioritize people over profits, to measure success in sustainability rather than speed. My father would have loved you, and I wanted everyone here to know that your contributions matter, that we see you, that we're grateful." Before Daniel could respond, Ariana raised her voice to address the room. "Everyone, if I could have your attention for a moment?" The crowd quieted, faces turning toward them. Most of you know Daniel Reed by now. Some of you knew him as the facilities worker who kept our spaces clean. Others met him after the viral video that exposed his remarkable background. But I want to tell you who Daniel is to me. She paused, gathering her thoughts. When I took over Horizon after my father's death, I thought leadership meant being the smartest person in the room, the most demanding, the one who pushed hardest. I confused authority with respect, and in doing so, I created a culture where people were afraid to tell me the truth. Daniel changed that with a single act of courage. He told me I was wrong when no one else would. And then, instead of gloating or demanding recognition, he simply offered to help make things better. The room was completely silent now, everyone listening. Over the past 2 months, Daniel has helped us fix critical safety issues, win a transformative military contract, and build systems that will serve this company for years to come. But more than that, he's reminded us that every person in this room, whether they're an engineer or a janitor, a CEO, or a cafeteria worker, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. That lesson is worth more than any contract. She turned to Daniel. So thank you for your expertise, for your patience, for your willingness to believe that people can change. Horizon is better because you're here. The room erupted in applause. People came over to shake Daniel's hand, share their own stories of how his presence had changed their experience at the company. A young woman from the facilities team, someone Daniel had worked alongside during his janitor months, approached with tears in her eyes. "You never acted like you were better than us," she said. "Even after everyone found out who you were, you still said hello in the hallways, still treated us like we mattered. That meant everything to people like me who usually feel invisible." "You were never invisible to me," Daniel said gently, "and you shouldn't be invisible to anyone. The work you do matters." As the evening progressed, Daniel found himself actually enjoying the party. He talked with James about potential improvements to the pilot training program. He laughed at Marcus's stories about his early days at Horizon when they'd been building helicopters in a garage with more ambition than funding. He even danced with Ariana when the band played something slow, and she'd looked at him with a question in her eyes. "This is weird," she said as they swayed to the music. "Good weird, but weird." 6 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be dancing with my former janitor at a company party, I would have thought they were crazy. 6 months ago, if someone told me I'd be consulting for an aerospace company and dancing with its CEO, I would have thought they were describing someone else's life. Maybe we're both living someone else's life now. Better versions of ourselves. Maybe, Daniel agreed. Or maybe we're just finally living our actual lives instead of the ones we thought we were supposed to have. The song ended, and they separated, the moment passing into memory. Daniel checked his watch and realized it was past 10, later than he'd intended to stay. He found Ariana to say goodbye and thank her for the recognition, then headed out into the cold December night. His phone rang as he was walking to his truck. An unknown number, which he almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Daniel Reed?" The voice was male, professional, vaguely familiar. "Speaking." "This is Colonel Patterson from Wright-Patterson Medical Center. We spoke during your evaluation. I hope I'm not calling too late." "It's fine. What can I do for you, Colonel?" "I wanted to follow up on something we discussed. You mentioned interest in possibly pursuing civilian aviation certification now that military flying isn't an option. I've been consulting with some specialists, and we believe that with targeted physical therapy and a minor surgical procedure to remove scar tissue, you could potentially be cleared for civilian rotorcraft operations under specific conditions." Daniel stopped walking, his heart suddenly loud in his ears. What kind of specific conditions? "Visual flight rules only. No night operations. Aircraft with dual controls and modern stability systems. Maximum flight duration of 2 hours with mandatory rest periods. Essentially instructional flying or recreational operations. Nothing demanding, nothing that would put you at risk if your symptoms flared. But Daniel, it would be flying. Real flying, not just observer seat." The possibility hung in the air like a gift Daniel wasn't sure he should accept. What would the procedure involve? Outpatient surgery, about 90 minutes. Recovery time of 6 to 8 weeks before you could begin flight training for the civilian certification. The Air Force would cover the costs as part of your medical retirement benefits, and I have contacts at the FAA who could help expedite the certification process. "Why are you doing this?" Daniel asked. "Why go to this effort for one grounded pilot?" Patterson was quiet for a moment. "Because I've spent 30 years in military medicine watching good people lose capabilities they'd built their entire identity around. Most of them never find their way back to any version of what they loved. But you found a different way to stay connected to aviation, to use your expertise, to contribute meaningfully. That resilience is rare, and if I can help you reclaim even a piece of what you lost, I want to try. You've earned that opportunity." Daniel leaned against his truck, looking up at the stars scattered across the winter sky. Flying again. Not combat, not the high-stakes military operations that had defined his career, but still the sky, the freedom, the pure joy of three-dimensional movement. "I need to think about it," he said finally. "Talk to my daughter, consider what it would mean for my work here. Can I have some time?" "Take all the time you need, but Daniel, don't let fear make this decision. I've seen your file, watched your simulator performance. You're still an exceptional pilot. The question isn't whether you can fly, it's whether you'll let yourself." After the call ended, Daniel sat in his truck for a long time, engine running for heat, mind churning through possibilities and fears. He could fly again. Limited, conditional, nothing like what he'd done before, but still flying. The question was whether that would be enough, or whether it would just reopen wounds he'd worked so hard to heal. He drove home and relieved Carol, who reported that Maya had gone to bed without incident after reading 2 chapters ahead in their current book because she couldn't wait to find out what happened next. Daniel checked on his daughter, watching her sleep with that complete abandonment only children achieved, and felt the weight of the decision pressing on him. What would Sarah say? She'd probably tell him to stop overthinking and trust his instincts. She'd remind him that regret came from not trying, not from trying and failing. She'd push him toward the sky because she'd understood that part of him better than he sometimes understood it himself. The next morning was Saturday, which meant their usual routine: pancakes, cartoons, then whatever adventure they felt like pursuing. Today, Maya wanted to go to the science museum, so they bundled up against the cold and made the drive to Denver. As they wandered through exhibits about space exploration and aerodynamics, Daniel found himself watching Maya more than the displays. She approached everything with such unselfconscious curiosity, asking questions that revealed her quick mind, making connections that impressed the docents. She was becoming her own person, growing into independence that both thrilled and terrified him. "Daddy, look at this," Maya called from across the room, pointing at a wind tunnel where you could test paper airplane designs. "Can we try?" They spent an hour folding different airplane configurations and testing them, laughing when designs failed spectacularly and cheering when one caught the airstream just right and soared. It was simple, joyful, the kind of moment Daniel had learned to treasure. Over lunch in the museum cafe, Maya asked the question that had been building all morning. "Daddy, are you sad?" "What makes you think I'm sad?" "You have your thinking face on. The one you get when you're trying to make a decision about something important." Daniel marveled again at her perceptiveness. "You're right. I got a phone call last night about something that might let me fly helicopters again. Not like I used to, but still flying, and I'm trying to decide if I should do it." "Why wouldn't you?" Maya's confusion was genuine. "You love flying." "I do, but I also love being here with you. And I'm worried that if I start flying again, even just a little, it might take time away from us. Or that it might make me want more and more until I'm not present the way I want to be." Maya considered this seriously while eating French fries. Mrs. Henderson says that parents are allowed to do things they love even if it means their kids have to share them sometimes. She says that's how kids learn that grown-ups are whole people, not just parents. Mrs. Henderson is very wise. "So if flying makes you happy and you can do it without disappearing like you're worried about, then I think you should do it. Because, Daddy, I want you to be happy, not just happy because of me happy because of you too." The words came from a 7-year-old, but they carried wisdom that cut straight to the heart of Daniel's fear. He'd been so focused on being a good father that he'd forgotten Maya needed to see him be a whole person, someone with interests and passions beyond parenting, someone who could model pursuing dreams responsibly. "When did you get so smart?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I've always been smart. You just notice it more now." She grinned at him, and he saw Sarah in that expression, the same mischief, the same light. That evening, after Maya was in bed, Daniel called Colonel Patterson back. "I want to do it," he said. "The surgery, the therapy, the certification process. I want to try." "Excellent. I'll start coordinating with the surgical team. We can probably get you scheduled within the next 3 weeks if that timeline works." "One condition, though," Daniel added. "I need the recovery period to be over by late February. My daughter's birthday is March 7th, and I will not miss it for anything." "Understood. We'll make it work." "Daniel, you're making the right choice. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let ourselves want something again." Christmas came and went in a blur of wrapping paper and laughter. Daniel had saved carefully throughout the year, and he splurged on gifts for Maya, a telescope she'd been wanting, books about space exploration, a model rocket kit they could build together. On Christmas morning, watching her face light up with joy, he felt wealthy in the ways that actually mattered. Ariana had given him a generous bonus as part of the company's holiday distribution, and Daniel used part of it to take Maya to a fancy restaurant she'd seen on TV and thought looked magical. They dressed up, Maya in a sparkly dress that made her feel like a princess, Daniel in his sport coat, and ate food with French names they had to ask the waiter to pronounce. It was ridiculous and wonderful, and Maya talked about it for days afterward. The surgery was scheduled for January 15th. The night before, Daniel sat Maya down and explained what would happen, that he'd be gone for a few days, that Carol would stay with her, that when he came back he'd need to take it easy for a while. She listened carefully, asked practical questions about the recovery process, then hugged him tight. "You're going to be great, Daddy. And when you can fly again, will you take me up?" "If you want to go, and if the doctors say it's safe, absolutely." "I want to go. I want to see what you see up there." The surgery went smoothly. Daniel woke up in recovery feeling like he'd been hit by a truck, but the surgeon reported that they'd successfully removed the scar tissue that had been compressing his spinal nerves. The real test would be whether it made a difference in his symptoms, but initial indicators were positive. Recovery was harder than he'd expected. The first week was mostly pain management and trying to move without aggravating the surgical site. Carol brought Maya to visit every day, and his daughter would sit beside his bed telling him about school and reading him stories and generally refusing to let him feel sorry for himself. "You're being very brave," she told him seriously. "Braver than when you flew helicopters, because this kind of brave is quieter." By week 3, Daniel was doing physical therapy twice a day and seeing measurable improvement. The numbness in his left leg was less frequent and less severe. His pain levels were manageable without medication. The therapist was optimistic that he'd regain even more function as the nerves finished healing. At week 6, Colonel Patterson called with news. "Your latest scans show remarkable improvement. The nerve conduction tests are better than I'd hoped. Daniel, I think you're ready to start the flight certification process." "Really? That fast?" "Your body responded exceptionally well to the procedure, but we'll still take it slow. Start with ground school to refresh your knowledge, then simulator work, then actual flight training with an instructor. No rushing, no pressure. We're building your confidence and capabilities back gradually." The ground school was almost insulting in its simplicity after decades of flying, but Daniel approached it with humility. He'd been away from civilian aviation long enough that regulations had changed, technology had evolved, procedures had been updated. He studied the material carefully, took the written exams seriously, and passed everything on the first attempt. The simulator work was more challenging. The civilian aircraft he'd be certified on was smaller and lighter than military helicopters, with different handling characteristics. It took him several sessions to adjust his technique, to recalibrate his instincts for something less aggressive and more forgiving. But gradually, it came back. The smooth coordination of hands and feet, the constant micro-adjustments that kept an aircraft stable, the spatial awareness that separated good pilots from great ones. "You're a natural," his instructor said after a particularly good session. "Though I suppose that's not surprising given your background. I've been away for 5 years. I was afraid I'd forgotten." Some things you can't forget. They're written too deep. In early March, 2 weeks before Maya's birthday, Daniel had his first actual flight in a civilian helicopter, a small Robinson R-44 with glass instruments and forgiving handling. His instructor sat beside him, hands ready to take over if needed, but Daniel flew smoothly from takeoff to landing without incident. The joy of it was almost overwhelming. Not the intensity of combat flying, not the razor-edge precision of military operations, but something simpler and pure, just being in the sky, moving through 3 dimensions, feeling the helicopter respond to his touch. When they landed, Daniel had to take a moment to compose himself before shutting down, emotions too big for words. "How was it?" the instructor asked. "Like coming home," Daniel said simply. Over the next week, he flew 5 more times, each flight building his confidence and capabilities. The FAA examiner who conducted his practical test was thorough but fair, and at the end of a 90-minute evaluation that covered everything from basic maneuvers to emergency procedures, she shook his hand and said, "Congratulations, Mr. Reed, you're certified." Maya's birthday fell on a perfect Colorado morning, the sky so blue and clear it seemed to go on forever. Daniel had planned something special, coordinating with Horizon and pulling in favors from people who'd become genuine friends over the past months. After pancakes and presents at home, he told Maya to dress warm and pack her camera. They were going on an adventure. She bounced with excitement the entire drive to Horizon, asking questions he deflected with mysterious smiles. When they arrived at the facility, the main hangar was empty except for a small civilian helicopter sitting in the center. Not the massive Valkyrie, but something smaller and more approachable. James stood beside it in casual clothes, grinning. Ariana, Marcus, and Carol were there too, along with several other Horizon employees who'd become part of their extended family. "Happy birthday, Butterfly," Daniel said, walking Maya toward the helicopter. "How would you like to go flying with your dad?" Maya's eyes went impossibly wide. "Really? Like, really, really?" "Really, really. If you want to." She looked at the helicopter, then at Daniel, then back at the aircraft with an expression of pure wonder. "I want to. Yes, yes, yes." James helped them both get strapped into the helicopter, showing Maya how the seatbelts worked and letting her put on a headset so she could hear Daniel through the intercom. The assembled crowd stepped back as Daniel ran through his pre-flight checks with Maya, watching intently, asking questions about every switch and gauge. "Ready?" Daniel asked once they were secure. "Ready!" Maya's voice came through the headset, vibrating with excitement. Daniel started the engine, and the rotor blades began their familiar rotation, building from whisper to roar. He watched Maya's face transform into pure joy as they lifted off the ground, boulder falling away beneath them. They climbed gradually, and Daniel narrated everything he was doing, making it educational and magical all at once. "Look, Butterfly, there's your school, and there's our house, and those mountains we see every day. We're going to fly right toward them." Maya pressed her face against the window, her camera forgotten in the wonder of seeing the world from this new perspective. "Daddy, this is amazing. Is this what you felt when you were flying before?" "This is exactly what I felt, like anything is possible." They flew for 30 minutes, circling over places that mattered. The park where they'd had picnics, the museum they'd visited, the streets of their neighborhood. Daniel kept the flight smooth and gentle, aware that this was Maya's first time in the air and wanting it to be perfect. As they headed back toward Horizon, Maya said through the intercom, "Daddy, I understand now why you missed flying so much. It's like magic, but real." "It is magic," Daniel agreed. "The best kind. The kind that's made of physics and skill and courage all mixed together." The landing was feather soft, Daniel's touch gentle as he brought them back to Earth. When they shut down and climbed out, Maya ran to the assembled crowd, talking so fast her words tumbled over each other, trying to describe everything she'd seen and felt. Ariana approached Daniel with an expression that mixed happiness and something deeper. "That was beautiful to watch. You both looked so happy up there." "I was happy. Happier than I've been in years, maybe." Daniel watched Maya showing Carol something on her camera, still vibrating with excitement. "Thank you for making this possible. For the job, for the flexibility, for believing I was worth investing in." "You invested in us first," Ariana reminded him. "This is just returning the favor." Later that evening, after birthday cake and more presents and the exhausted contentment that comes from a perfect day, Daniel tucked Maya into bed and sat beside her in the familiar ritual. "Best birthday ever?" he asked. "Best birthday ever," she confirmed. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" "Anything. Are you happy now? Like, really happy? Not just pretending for me happy?" Daniel thought about the question seriously, giving it the weight it deserved. "Yeah, Butterfly, I'm really happy, not because everything is perfect or because I have everything I once lost, but because I've learned that happiness isn't about getting back to who you were before bad things happened. It's about becoming someone new who can hold both the grief and the joy, the loss and the possibility. Does that make sense?" "I think so. Like how I'm sad sometimes about not knowing Mommy, but I can also be happy about the life we have now?" "Exactly like that. We're allowed to miss what we lost and still love what we have." Maya nodded, satisfied. "Good. Because I like who you are now, Daddy. You're home more, and you smile more, and you don't have that faraway look like you're somewhere else." "I'm right here," Daniel promised, "and I'm not going anywhere." The next few months unfolded with a gentleness Daniel had learned to appreciate rather than fear. He continued his consulting work with Horizon, helping refine the Valkyrie training program and supporting the military integration process. The first production aircraft rolled off the line in April to widespread acclaim, exactly what they'd promised, delivered safely and with integrity intact. James got promoted to chief test pilot officially, and he and Daniel developed a partnership built on mutual respect and complementary skills. They'd spend hours debating the finer points of helicopter aerodynamics, challenging each other's assumptions, making each other better. Ariana thrived in her evolved leadership style, building a company culture where people felt valued and heard. The viral videos that had started everything faded from public consciousness the way internet phenomena always do, replaced by new stories and new scandals. But the changes those videos catalyzed remained, not just at Horizon, but in Daniel's life, in the way he understood his own worth. In May, Daniel started taking on occasional flight instruction work, teaching civilians who wanted to learn rotorcraft. It was rewarding in unexpected ways, helping people discover the joy of flight, watching confidence build as skills developed, sharing his love of aviation in a context that didn't involve life or death stakes. One of his students was a woman in her 40s who'd always dreamed of learning to fly but had been told she was too old to start. After her first solo flight, she hugged Daniel with tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for believing I could do this. My whole life, people told me what I couldn't do. You're the first instructor who focused on what I could." "That's because limits are mostly lies we tell ourselves," Daniel said, "or lies other people tell us that we believe. Real limitations exist, but they're fewer than we think." As summer arrived, Daniel established a rhythm that honored all the parts of himself. Father first, always. Maya's needs setting the structure of his days. Then consultant, helping Horizon grow and succeed. Then instructor, sharing his knowledge with new pilots. And finally, on rare perfect mornings, just a pilot himself, taking the helicopter up alone to fly through the mountains, feeling the freedom that had once defined him and now complemented the life he'd built. One Saturday in June, Daniel received an unexpected visitor at his house. A young man in his 20s, military short haircut, nervous energy. He introduced himself as Lieutenant Ryan Torres, currently stationed at Fort Carson. "Sir, I hope this isn't weird, but I had to come see you. I trained under you at Fort Rucker 6 years ago. You were my instructor for advanced tactics, and you basically taught me everything I know about flying. When I saw the video of you flying the Valkyrie, when I learned what happened to you, I just wanted to say thank you for everything you taught me and for showing me that there's life after the uniform." Daniel invited him in, and they spent 2 hours talking about flying and transition and the challenge of defining yourself beyond your military service. When Torres left, Daniel felt the satisfaction that comes from realizing your influence extends further than you knew, that the work you did mattered to people you'd forgotten. In July, the Valkyrie program hit a significant milestone, the first operational deployment with military units. Daniel attended the ceremony at Fort Bragg where the aircraft were officially handed over, and he stood beside Ariana and the Horizon team watching pilots climb into machines they'd helped build. General Richardson spoke about safety, innovation, and the importance of companies that prioritize getting it right over getting it fast. "This aircraft will save lives," she said, "not just because it's technologically advanced, but because it was built with integrity by people who understood that every helicopter carries someone's parent, child, spouse, friend. That consciousness shows in every system, every safety feature, every design choice." Afterward, Daniel stood alone looking at the row of Valkyries gleaming in the summer sun. He thought about how far they'd all come. The aircraft from troubled prototype to operational success. Horizon from fear-driven culture to values-based leadership. Ariana from cruel to compassionate. Himself from invisible to essential. James found him there. "Quite a view, huh? Yeah, we built something good. We built something great. And Daniel, I know you don't like the attention, but people are going to remember this. The janitor who was secretly a hero, who saved a company and helped build aircraft that will serve for decades. That's a legacy." "I don't care about legacy," Daniel said honestly. "I care about whether the pilots flying these machines get home safely to their families. I care about whether Maya grows up knowing her dad kept his promises. I care about whether the work I do makes the world even slightly better than I found it. If that creates a legacy, fine, but it's not what drives me." "That's exactly why it matters," James said quietly. "Because you're not trying to be remembered. You're just trying to be good." As fall arrived and Maya started 3rd grade, Daniel reflected on the full year since that morning Ariana had mocked him in front of cameras. So much had changed, yet the core of his life remained wonderfully stable. Maya's needs came first, his work was meaningful, his friendships were genuine. The viral fame had faded into comfortable obscurity. He was known at Horizon, respected in local aviation circles, but he could still go to the grocery store without being recognized. One October evening, Daniel was helping Maya with homework when his phone rang. An unknown number, but something made him answer. "Daniel Reed?" The voice was professional, authoritative. "This is Secretary of Defense Martinez. I know this is unexpected, but I wanted to reach out personally. The Valkyrie program has exceeded all expectations, and I've been briefed on your role in making that happen. The President has asked me to convey his gratitude and to inform you that you're being considered for the Defense Meritorious Service Medal for your contributions to military aviation. Daniel sat down slowly, stunned. Sir, I appreciate the recognition, but I'm not sure I've done anything worthy of that level of award. You identified critical safety issues that could have resulted in catastrophic failures. You designed training protocols that are becoming the standard for rotorcraft integration. And perhaps most importantly, you demonstrated leadership that inspired a company to prioritize safety over profits. Daniel, we need more people like you in defense contracting. If you're ever interested in a position at the Pentagon, thank you, sir, but no. I'm happy where I am. I have a daughter who needs me present, and I've learned that being a good father is more important than any career achievement. I respect that. The offer stands if you ever change your mind. And Daniel, thank you for your service. All of it, the years in uniform and the years after. After the call ended, Daniel sat quietly processing what had just happened. A medal from the President, an offer to work at the Pentagon, recognition at the highest levels. 5 years ago, those opportunities would have seemed like validation of his worth. Now they felt like temptations away from what actually mattered. Who was that? Maya asked, looking up from her math problems. Someone offering me a very important job that I'm not going to take. Why not? Because the most important job I have is being your dad, and I'm not giving that up for anything. Maya smiled, then returned to her homework. Good. I like having you around. In November, Horizon celebrated the 1-year anniversary of the viral video that had changed everything. Ariana threw a party specifically to mark the occasion, inviting everyone who'd been part of the journey. They watched the original video together, laughing at how much had changed, marveling at the unlikely chain of events that had transformed a moment of humiliation into a catalyst for growth. I was such an ass, Ariana said, shaking her head at her younger self on screen. Look at that smirk, that arrogance. I'm embarrassed watching it now. Don't be embarrassed, Daniel said. Be grateful you had the capacity to change. A lot of people don't. Only because you showed me what change looked like. Daniel, I've been thinking. About that marriage proposal? He interrupted with a grin. Because I'm still not interested, even though you've become much nicer. Everyone laughed, the joke landing differently now that genuine affection existed between them. Ariana rolled her eyes. Not about marriage, though, thanks for the ego boost. I've been thinking about starting a mentorship program, pairing our executives with support staff to break down hierarchies and build relationships across roles. Creating opportunities for people to be seen as whole individuals rather than just job titles. Would you help me design it? I'd be honored. As winter returned and the anniversary of Sarah's death approached, Daniel took Maya to visit the cemetery where her mother was buried. They'd been several times over the years, but this visit felt different. Maya was older now, more capable of understanding loss, and Daniel found himself sharing stories he'd previously thought she was too young to hear. Your mom was the bravest person I ever knew, he said, sitting on the cold ground beside Sarah's headstone. Not because she faced cancer without fear, she was terrified, but because she faced it anyway. She fought for every extra day so she could be with you longer. And in the end, she made me promise to live fully, not just survive. Are you keeping that promise? Maya asked. I'm trying. Some days are better than others, but yeah, I think I'm keeping it. Good. Because I bet Mommy is watching, and she'd want you to be happy. Daniel looked at his daughter, this remarkable human he and Sarah had created, and felt overwhelmed by gratitude that he'd been given this gift. You know what your mom would love most about you? What? That you're kind. Smarter than most adults, funny as hell, curious about everything. All of that is great. But the fact that you think about other people's feelings, that you worry about whether I'm happy, that you try to make the world better in small ways every day, that's what she'd be most proud of. They sat together in comfortable silence, the winter sun pale and cold, until Maya said she was ready to go. As they walked back to the truck, she slipped her hand into Daniel's. Daddy? I'm glad you can fly again, but I'm also glad you're still here on the ground with me most of the time. Me too, Butterfly. Me too. On a crystalline morning in December, almost exactly a year since he'd first received the call from General Hawkins, Daniel stood in the Horizon hangar watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and amber. The The Valkyrie production line was running smoothly now, aircraft rolling out to military units across the country. His consulting work had evolved into something sustainable, meaningful without being consuming. Maya was thriving, her confidence and curiosity growing daily. James joined him, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Thought you might need this. You've got that contemplative look." "Just thinking about how strange life is. A year ago, I was mopping these floors thinking my flying days were over forever. Now I'm certified again, teaching new pilots, consulting on military programs. And my daughter tells anyone who will listen that her dad is basically a superhero." "You kind of are," James said without irony. "Not because of the flying, though that's impressive, but because you rebuilt your life after it fell apart. You raised an amazing kid by yourself, and you helped a whole company remember what integrity looks like. That's superhero stuff. Or it's just what you do when you don't have other options. Keep going, adapt, try to be decent along the way. There's always other options. You chose the hard ones that led somewhere good instead of the easy ones that led nowhere." They stood together watching the light fade, 2 pilots separated by generations and experience, but connected by their love of flight and their understanding of what it meant to lose it and find it again in new forms. Ariana appeared from her office, bundled against the cold that was seeping into the hangar. "There you are, Daniel. I've been meaning to ask. Maya's getting older, and I know you've been thinking about her future. Horizon has a scholarship program for employees' children. Full ride to any college for kids who demonstrate academic excellence and community involvement. Maya would qualify in a heartbeat. That's generous, but she's only 8. College is a long way off. Plans start early, and Daniel, I want you to know you have a home here for as long as you want it. Not because we need you, though we do, but because you're family now, you and Maya both." The word hung in the air, family. Daniel had thought he'd lost that when Sarah died, had believed it would just be him and Maya against the world forever. But somehow, without trying, he'd accumulated a chosen family, Carol and Marcus and James and Ariana and all the others who'd become part of his life's fabric. "Thank you," he said simply, because some gifts were too big for elaborate words. That evening, Daniel picked Maya up from her after-school art class and drove them to the small diner they'd come to consider their special place. Over burgers and milkshakes, Maya told him about the project she was working on, a painting of their family that included her mom as an angel watching over them. "Mrs. Patterson says angels aren't real, but I told her that's just because she hasn't met Mommy yet. Mommy is definitely watching us." "I think you're right," Daniel said, his throat tight. "And I think she'd be so proud of the person you're becoming." "What about you, Daddy? Are you proud of who you're becoming?" It was the kind of question only a child would ask, cutting straight to the essential truth with no room for deflection or pretense. Daniel thought about the man he'd been. The military pilot who'd measured worth in flight hours and combat medals, who'd believed his identity was inseparable from his rank. And he thought about the man he was now, father first, consultant, instructor, friend, someone whose dignity wasn't contingent on external validation. "Yeah, Butterfly. I'm proud of who I'm becoming, not because I've achieved anything impressive, but because I've learned to measure success differently, by whether I'm present for you, by whether the work I do makes things safer for others, by whether I treat people with dignity regardless of their job title. Those might not be dramatic accomplishments, but they're true ones." "That's what really matters," Maya said with the casual wisdom of childhood. "The true stuff." As they finished their meal and prepared to head home through the winter darkness, Daniel felt something settle in his chest that he finally recognized as his peace. Not the absence of struggle or challenge or occasional sorrow, but the presence of meaning, purpose, connection. He'd lost so much: his career, his wife, his certainty about who he was supposed to be. But in that losing, he'd found something more precious. He'd found himself whole and complex, capable of holding both grief and joy, both limitation and possibility. The sky would always call to him. That much would never change. But the ground where Maya waited, where his friends gathered, where his life unfolded in ordinary, extraordinary moments, that was home. And home was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Outside the diner, as they walked to the truck under stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch, Maya suddenly stopped and looked up. Daddy, when you fly now, what do you think about? Daniel followed her gaze skyward, considering the question. I think about how lucky I am to be able to do something I love, to come home to you when I'm done, to have learned that flying isn't what made me whole. Being present did. The flying is just the bonus. Good answer, Maya said, slipping her hand into his. Now let's go home. You promised to help me with my science project, and it's not going to build itself. They drove through the night, father and daughter, two people who'd survived loss and found their way back to living. Behind them, the mountains stood eternal and silent. Above them, the stars wheeled through their ancient dance. And ahead of them, lit by the truck's headlights, the road home stretched out full of ordinary magic, homework and bedtime stories and coffee with friends and work that mattered, and all the small sacred things that comprise a life well lived. Daniel had been invisible once. Then he'd been exposed, elevated, recognized. But in the end, what mattered most was neither the hiding nor the fame. What mattered was this: being seen by the people who truly knew him, being present for the moments that wouldn't make headlines, being brave enough to live fully in the aftermath of loss. He'd promised Sarah he would live. And as the lights of home appeared in the distance, Maya humming beside him, the memory of flight still bright in his bones, Daniel Reed knew he was keeping that promise. One day at a time, one moment of presence at a time, one choice to show up fully at a time. And it was enough.